Thank you.
Thank you. Capital C. Capital C. Yeah, I think. But that's tomorrow. Good night.
Gary's all ready.
Are we all set to go, Stacy? Okay, and folks, welcome to the Ada County Highway District. We are beginning our meetings today, pre-commission, with an update from Gary Inselman on the Floating Feather and State Highway 16 intersection projects.
Thank you, President Goldthorpe. For the record, Gary Inselman, Deputy Director, Development and Technical Services. Just want to give you an update on Highway 16 and Floating Feather. In August, we attended a meeting that ITD had called with different agency representatives. ITD was present, Compass, City of Eagle, City of Star, City of Emmett, and ACHD, and representing ACHD was Commissioner May, Justin Lucas, and myself. We were specifically discussing Highway 16 north of State Street. And the status of this corridor for ITD, they had an environmental impact study done in 2004 that ran from Highway 44 to Highway 52 in Emmett. Obviously, it's woefully out of date and does not, it's not compatible with current and future land use plans. They do have plans to reevaluate the corridor, but it's not funded until 26, and we have many developments occurring in the area on both sides of the highway in City of Star and City of Eagle, creating some pressure there on to make some decisions. And because of that EIS, ITD is unable to fund or construct any improvements to the highway that are incompatible with the existing adopted EIS, so that reevaluation is critical. As you've heard in other meetings, ITD is proceeding with these Highway 16 corridor from State Highway 44 to the interstate. And as you've also heard, they're proceeding with the designs that phase 3 of that project, which would be the interchanges, and hoping if funding and timing works, that they will just proceed straight to building phase 3 instead of the interim signalized intersections. That would include an interchange at 44 and 16, which directly impacts Highway 16 to the north, the intersections at Floating Feather, and all the way to Beacon Light because of the transition from a freeway type of, expressway type of facility and interchange situation back to a 2-lane rural highway. Back to Floating Feather itself. This is the existing Floating Feather where it intersects Highway 16 between Palmer and Pollard. Floating Feather jogs to the north. This is a little larger vicinity map of the area. You can see the grading of the new streets and some paving of new streets of the developments on both sides of the highway. And then this is the new section of Floating Feather on the west side of Highway 16 that has been built by Roste Farms Development, which is a subdivision that is on both sides, north and south of this alignment. And the realignment of Floating Feather into this location is in accordance with the Floating Feather Road Realignment Study that the Commission adopted in September of 2008. And since that time, we have been planning this through our master street map. The cities have been planning for this through adoption of our master street map and their comprehensive plans. And it's also listed in our CIP. So you can see the newly constructed realigned Floating Feather. No connection to the highway yet. That's one of the reasons we met in August at ITD. And you can see up in the background of that, the subdivisions in Eagle, and there's a wide clear strip between a new subdivision and the trees there. We have a 74-foot right-of-way for the Floating Feather on that side of the highway as well, preserved through that development, and we're working our way west. So takeaways from that meeting, Floating Feather will be realigned to the south of the existing at Highway 16. It's just a matter of time and how. The Roste Farms developers are completing their work on the west side. ITD will consider an interim 3/4 access at that future Floating Feather Road, so they'll allow left turns in, right turns in, and right turns out. And we would only connect that west side at this time. That is contingent upon severing the access at the existing Floating Feather on the west side. ITD will not allow both intersections to exist at the same time on the same side of the highway. This interim configuration, it is aimed at providing the immediate service needed while a reevaluation of the corridor is done by ITD. And ITD is committed to considering the locals, meaning the City of Star and City of Eagles, requests for a connection at Highway 16 and Floating Feather, as well as other access needs to the north. Some next steps, ACHD would need to lead the effort to sever that western access to Highway 16 at the existing West Floating Feather Road. We would want to include some public outreach, obviously to the impacted property owners and then to the greater area for the users of the roadway. We would recommend a public hearing for the commission to take action and officially close that access. We would need to design and contract that work out. And then Roste Farms would complete their new intersection with State Highway 16 so that that could happen concurrently. The existing intersection, the Floating Feather, on the west side of the highway there, on the north side, that has an approved preliminary plat, Milestone Ranch. It was approved August 31st of this year. As part of their conditions of approval, they will dedicate right-of-way for a cul-de-sac to terminate Floating Feather on the west side of the highway. And ITD happens to own the parcel on the southwest corner, and they would agree to dedicate additional right-of-way so that a cul-de-sac could be built and the roadway could be terminated on the west side of the highway. A really fancy depiction of what that may look like.
Is this, Gary, is this view looking north?
This is looking west.
Looking west, okay.
And Gary, I'm just having a hard time understanding, like, what do you mean exactly by terminating it if there's going to be a roundabout? Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
It just means that the road would end in a cul-de-sac and would not connect to the highway.
So
So-
it would go above the highway?
No, the connection to the highway will be dug up. We'll build a cul-de-sac so there's a turnaround,
Okay.
and people traveling on the old Floating Feather Road will not be able to cross the highway, enter the highway. They will be able to exit their properties and drive west to Pollard and then north to Beacon Light or south to Floating Feather to move about the area.
And what's the rationale for Floating Feather being terminated at Highway 16? and not, is it by like, mileage, that they only want certain crossings and access points by mileage? Like, what's the rationale behind that?
Commissioner Pickering, that's absolutely right. They do not want intersections that close together. It's not safe on a facility that has the volumes and the speeds that Highway 16 does. So here you've got the existing floating feather up at the top of the photo. The new floating feather, it's only like a quarter mile away.
So wait, so you're saying we're gonna terminate the old floating feather road and
Yes.
make a new floating feather, and that's gonna connect to Highway 16?
Correct,
Okay.
absolutely.
Mr. President and Gary, so what's the time frame that we're anticipating that floating feather will be this jog using Highway 16? Because obviously we're not ready to build the new floating feather to the east of Highway 16. So are we talking 5 years, 10 years, unknown?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, on the west side, obviously, they built the road.
Right.
As soon as we can have our public process, take the official action to close West Floating Feather Road, the cul-de-sac could be built and the new intersection built next spring. The
Yeah.
east side,
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
there is development that's moving west. There is a proposed subdivision that would continue our ability to have the right-of-way and floating feather get all the way to the highway. In our initial conversations with them, they are agreeable to building the road. It wouldn't go all the way to Palmer. It would go to a collector roadway that will run north-south from Floating Feather down to State Street. They don't control all of the land to get clear to Palmer. But with that connection, then we could terminate Floating Feather on the east side. That could happen in the next few years. And there's the ownership on the east side, it's predominantly, I think, one owner. So it could terminate at Palmer and be done. It's not like we have to maintain access to several residences. There aren't any. So we will work with the landowners and the developers as those things move forward. The timeline, I'm guessing, 2 to 3 years.
But that's dependent on the movement of this development, because the developer will build the east segment of the new floating feather, just like a developer's built the west segment of the new floating feather, right? So
That is correct.
it's dependent on the developer's timetable, not ours or ITD's.
Commissioner Hanson, that's correct. And they're moving fairly quickly with these subdivisions.
So in the meantime, if the southern part of the new floating feather is a right-in, you can't turn left out of there. Will that same restriction apply to the northern old segment coming from the east? Will they be restricted and they could not turn left? They could only turn right, but you could turn left into it. Is that going to be correct? In other words, there's going to be access restricted once you've closed off the west portion of the old floating feather. There are going to be access restrictions imposed on the east segment of the old floating feather.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, I don't believe ITD would restrict the left turning movement out of old East Floating Feather at that time. But when they do the new Floating Feather on the east side to the south, it would be limited to the left in, right out, just as the west. There will not be any cross traffic across the highway. You can't drive straight across Floating Feather to go from Eagle to Star.
On the new floating feather.
Right. And you wouldn't on the old, once we terminate the west side, it would just be a T intersection for that.
Even though it's
interim
aligned, there won't be lights or a through. Even though the two segments of the new floating feather will be aligned, there won't be a through, a way for someone to drive through. So that's not really connected to each other, at least. So it's not true connectivity from the standpoint of the
Right.
neighborhoods.
And Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, and that is based on ITD's access guidelines and with the interchange at State
Yeah.
Street proposed, you cannot get all of the merging and
Right.
different movements completed by floating feathers. So at best, it would be this scenario with right-handed deceleration lanes so people can get off out of the lane of traffic and slow down and make their right turn, and a right turn in or out and accelerate back onto the highway. And unless there's safety or operational issues, they would allow those left ends, but no cross traffic, no signal.
Right. So in future, somebody coming from the east side to the west side who doesn't want to go onto Highway 16, but they want to just like they can now on Old Floating Feather, what's their route? They're coming east on Floating Feather. Do they have to go down to State 44 and then back up again? Or is there a way? In other words, we're creating a wall of disconnection between two presumably new sets of neighborhoods.
And Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, they would have to go down to State Street or up to Beacon Light.
Yeah, okay. So
Beacon Light has a signal.
but the signal's going to stay at Beacon Light. That's not going to turn into an interchange like a freeway interchanger.
Not at this time.
So it's Beacon Light. Is that a mile? No?
Yes.
So, okay, so that's. I have a question because we discussed this at the joint meeting with Meridian. Couldn't a lot of the issues that are being driven by the expansion of Highway 16, extension of Highway 16, and here's an example of, it's basically a whole corridor. Can't we address the improvements that need to be made and timed with an extraordinary impact fee? Couldn't we go in and say, let's impose an extraordinary impact fee zone along the corridor for all of ACHD related improvements that have to happen, and have that extraordinary impact fee help to pay so that we don't have to either tap into our base for those accelerated improvements or try and find some other funding source.
Mr.
Wouldn't
President,
that be a logic? Isn't that what extraordinary impact fees are for?
Commissioner Hanson, there are 4 extraordinary impacts that aren't foreseen and planned for. Floating Feather and Beacon Light are both in our capital improvements plan. Our standard impact fees will pay to improve those. And they are now. We're paying for this road out of impact fees. You had one a few weeks back where we're building part of that realignment or connection of Beacon Light down to New Hope with impact fees. All of that is paid for out of standard impact fees because this is planned growth or planned impacts that are being addressed through our
So
impact
getting
program.
rid of a road and realigning it qualifies, even though you're not necessarily widening it, because you already, but realigning counts as a,
Well, Commissioner Hanson, it's a new road. It's a new arterial in this location.
so they don't count that we're getting rid of an old road or turning an old road into basically a dead end road. Okay, well, anyway, I to the extent there are significant improvements all along that corridor that aren't an expansion or creation of new roads, but have to be here. It's kind of a blank slate because we haven't seen it, but we certainly have in other areas where the demand for new crosswalks and all kinds of other issues about access, they're not impact fee eligible. So I'd like us to look at the extraordinary impact fee at least as a possibility to help fund those things that aren't impact fee eligible but are triggered by the shift of traffic in that corridor.
Right. And Commissioner Goldberg, Commissioner Hanson, the pedestrian crossings on the arterials that are listed in our CIP, those are impact fee eligible. We can pay for a new PHB pedestrian crossing out of impact fees on roadways that are listed in the CIP. That's part of the program.
Existing roadways, so that,
No, the ones in our CIP.
right, but existing roadways are going to be impacted by 16. Existing roadways, especially since some of them are not going to be connected now. And I know this doesn't have to do with this particular issue, but I wanted to look at more in depth as a potential source. There are existing roadways we're not going to expand, but the shift of the traffic because of 16 and the demands that will be placed, that are being placed on us doing things. Not everything in, all the impacts will be able to be paid for by impact fees. They're existing roads. They're just gonna get more traffic because of the way 16 is gonna go through there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like us to look at that.
Finally, Commissioners, ITD did draft a non-binding memorandum of understanding detailing the discussion that we had at our meeting in August. They are requesting that the different agencies sign that just to commemorate what was discussed and these interim steps forward. I've reviewed that with the director and legal counsel, and we've got some comments to make back, but without any major objections from you, we would get that modified and have the director sign that. And then obviously ITD is going to seek to accelerate funding for that reevaluation of the EIS for Highway 16 from 44 to 52 so that changes can be made to the current plans there. Because under the current EIS, it was no access to the highway and frontage roads, but it didn't develop out that way. The cities didn't adopt that in their plans, so there are no frontage roads. It's mainly residential. There's no commercial corridors, so it's a much different corridor through Ada County today, and we need to address those changes from ITD's original plans from 2004. I'll stand for any questions you may have.
Go ahead.
So I don't know if you attended or saw the joint meeting with the city of Meridian on Monday, but one of the questions from Councilwoman Strader was, how can, because a lot of, Highway 16, it's up against parts of Meridian. It's up against parts of Meridian, isn't that correct?
The new portion to the
Yeah.
south, absolutely.
So, and she brought up a really great point, is she wants to know how can, the city of Meridian be involved in this, because this is going to greatly impact their residents and their access. And, of course, in the meeting, she just didn't voice support for obviously an expressway. So what's kind of your given that you guys were at the meeting and I wasn't, when's the best time or the right place to connect the city of Meridian to these conversations?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, on the new segments, I would hope they've been talking with ITD for years, because I know past staff had at the city of Meridian, because this has been planned for many, many years, and it's always been planned as an expressway, but I believe they would be in there.
There's a pathway crossing at 5 Mile Creek. City of Meridian is coordinating with that.
Right, yeah. Yeah, Justin just said they're coordinating an underpass for their 5 Mile Creek pathway under the highway. And so they are involved with, in coordinating with ITD.
Okay, so they just need to be talking to ITD then, staff. And then what about electeds? Is there she should just be talking and working through her staff, or are there other opportunities?
She could talk with the District 3 representative. She could reach out to the District 3 staff.
Thanks, Gary.
And the city of Meridian has always been involved at the table when this started. And so I think they have probably the historical data that they could plug into and talk to ITDs.
Well, I mean, with new, council changes and different ideas and mindsets, those previous conversations and ideas might have shifted.
Yeah, correct. And Commissioner Pickering, Caleb Hood's been there that entire time. I'm sure he has some of the history.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
he'd be really good to connect with.
Thanks, Mr. President and Gary. I think that was a good conversation yesterday at the joint meeting, because we had, or on Monday, it was because we had the opportunity to realize, sort of feel what it's going to be like. They're realizing it's going to be a freeway.
Yeah.
And so at least there's one other pathway, 5 Mile, I now know it's going to go through. So there's quite a lot. So the opportunity, and I just wanted to reinforce that we're going to be as helpful and a strong ally with Meridian if they say we really need more connections. Otherwise, that Northwest Meridian just gets isolated. It's really tough for South Meridian and South Boise to connect over the freeway to the rest of their cities on the other side of I-84. I don't know whether, Mr. President, that this might be a good time to raise, but, we continue to see the need for ITD to come to our table and talk to us and help develop plans for old segments of 2026, 44, 2026 goes right through Garden City, Boise, it becomes Broadway. We're constantly telling them, well, that's an ITD facility, even though it's very much an urban area and has a lot of needs. And, when they need something, we're there at the table saying, yeah, what can we do to help you to make this work, like on Floating Feather? But it's much more difficult to get them, as it were, to play ball and say, can you prioritize some of these older highways that are going through the middle of our cities? And it's really hard. We want to be an ally with Garden City, with Boise, with Meridian, but it's really tough because ITC said basically, that we don't see that as a problem. We've moved on. We're going to be borrowing and spending to expand our system outside of the urban area, and actually creating more urban area. So I would like it I think the commission would like us to see sort of like a two-way street on these things, whether it's appropriate at those discussions. I think we have already committed to saying we want to have conversations with the highway transportation board about this because it continues to be an issue, and every one of us have had issues where, gosh, sorry, that's an ITD facility. Our jurisdiction stops, as soon as you get to the intersection.
Okay, I know our staff's talk, correct? So perhaps we could just have a little more of an interaction to start with staff as to what they know is going on, and then take it from there.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Gary.
Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
All right, we're going to go down on the tables on the floor again for a continuation of our integrated 5-year work plan study or work sessions. I would advise anybody who's tuned in to the Zoom that they should change over to the live stream on YouTube. I understand that you'll be able to hear a lot better that way.
Yeah, oh, sure.
That makes, yeah, that
I'm
makes
sure,
sense.
yeah, but so it was just, they have been part of it. Jim, you sit and see them
No.
on. No, no.
They're doing music chairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's your turn.
No, I'll put Kent there. I'll sit over here if I stay.
Where am I?
Oh, I didn't wear my, I love Lucy's side.
Well, today I'm more conservative anyway.
Oh, good, I'm distance from all you guys.
No, that's true.
We're not sharing this screen, so
Stacy, do we need to share it?
What, Jim?
Say the important ones are on the first 3 pages, so if you didn't get past those in the next hour and a half.
Well, I've been assured that you're not gonna take more than 5 minutes, so we're in great shape.
Are we good to go whenever?
Fortunately, Christy's done a fabulous job of incorporating life. concerns.
I can copy and paste with
Really glad to see scoping moved out.
Okay, as we begin, I think we owe it to ourselves to get a report from Justin as to how little the staff has been involved in this during the last week.
Well, Commissioners, thank you. For the record, I'm Justin Lucas, the Deputy Director of Planning and Project Management for the Ada County Highway District.
Make sure you speak up.
I'll do my best to raise, that's usually not a problem for me, if people hear me throughout the building. So we did want to step back, just before we dive back into the spreadsheet. There has been some kind of ongoing questions about the project process and other things like that, so we wanted to step back, take a brief amount of time at the beginning of this just to do a review, and then I'm going to hand it over to Christy, who's going to get into the specifics of the spreadsheet and all the different project requests that have come through. So on that note, I just wanted to start with, where all these projects come from, and you've heard this before. We call this the project identification phase. Partner agency requests, commission requests, public requests. At that level, it's not a project, it's just an idea. And so it starts as an idea. We try and gather all of those things together and keep track of them. We have a software that keeps track of all these ideas for us. But when they're identified, they're then moved into this next phase, which is project scoping and evaluation. Scoping is not design. Scoping is just a higher level, planning level look at the project to determine primarily, are there any major red flags from a technical perspective, drainage, some sort of right-of-way issue potentially, if there's any big deal going on out there. And we want to determine initial level project cost. That gives us the chance, when we have a cost, to program it into the system. Because without a cost, we don't know how to program it because it needs to fit within the fiscal constraints of the highway district. This process, we've modified it over the years. I ran this process years and years ago. We did it all at the staff level. Back in my day, it was like we could only do 30, 40 projects. We ramped that up at the staff level, got to about 40 or 50 projects a year. With all the demands we've had, with all the needs, with all the requests, last year was our first year, actually it's this year, fiscal year 21, we contracted that out. And so that's a new thing we've been doing to try and increase the capacity of staff to work on other things and to focus that effort and to add and grow that effort. So it's really an enhanced scoping process now, and we can do more. We hire a professional design firm who goes out and just does the initial scoping for us, brings us back a cost estimate as part of that process. And we do that on an annual basis. And so what we try to do is gather up project ideas over a year, and then once a year do a big list, and then push those projects forward into the scoping phase. So the final phase of the projects, we call it programming, which is what goes into the integrated 5-year work plan. So up to scoping, it's not even in the integrated 5-year work plan. It's just an idea. We keep in track of it behind the scenes. Once we have that cost estimate, we move it into the integrated 5-year work plan. It goes through those 4 phases. Concept study, not every project needs a concept study. So that's not always necessary. Some of them do. Coogie's a good example. We did a concept study before moving into the full design. There's the design, which is the actual engineering plans, the drawings that describe exactly what we're going to build, how deep we're going to dig, and all that kind of stuff. Then we move into that right-of-way acquisition phase, the construction phase. In our plan, you'll notice this typically takes between 3 and 5 years once it gets into the plan, just because of the timing associated with it, the funding. Right-of-way specifically, depending on the complexity, it can take quite a while to work through those negotiations with the property owners. And depending on design, that can take a long time too, depending on the complexity of the project. And during that design phase, we're doing a lot of public involvement. So that extends the time frame. Going out to the public, you see those, we send you those memos once a month. This project will be out for the public involvement. It's going to be out for 4 weeks for review. Then we come back and do a summary. And while we're doing the public involvement, we're not really actively designing because we want to wait for that public feedback to come back before we finalize some of those decisions. I do want to point out, however, though, that's typical. We can do things faster. We can, obviously. For example, some of the gap projects the commission raised a year ago. Those projects, those were brought up. We were told go faster. We identified a quick scoping effort. Some of those projects we realized could move faster, and they did, and we moved forward as best we could on those. They took overall about 2 years to complete. Some of them were faster if we could do it with in-house resources. And we've done that over the years in different scenarios based on commission direction. Some of that low-hanging fruit, there's not a lot left. I mean, we've been at this for a while. There's not a lot left of the low-hanging fruit that comes in. Sometimes, we'll get a project, but wanted to highlight that. So on that note, moving into kind of closing out some of the discussions we've had on the project process. Here's just options. These are things that staff, we've thought about looking at our process, the program, working with the commission on this. We believe this enhanced, accelerated scoping that you've asked for, getting some of these projects going faster and getting this cost estimate, we believe we can do some of this, and Christy will go into more detail. We'll get this going, we'll get these cost estimates and that initial scoping done. We're targeting a goal of January 1st. During this enhanced process also, frequent, consistent commission interaction. So that's something we're going to build into the scoping process. Specifically this year based on our interactions, and going forward, we will bring forward every year the list of scoped the projects we intend to scope, so that if there's something you don't see on the list that you think should be accelerated, you'll have that opportunity on an annual basis to let us know. So that we think that's going to help.
Justin?
Yes, sir.
And if there's any more curiosity than that, they can visit with you one-on-one, correct?
Yes, sir. At any time, if there's a desire for what's the status of this project conversation, call me. I'm glad to sit down and discuss projects with you.
Justin, I have another question.
Yes.
So I understand you're saying that a scope project doesn't necessarily mean that it's not in the plan, but why wouldn't it just be listed as a future project?
It's a good question, Commissioner. We try to keep the plan, and it's a judgment call really, and we can change this, but we try to keep the plan as realistic as possible, right? It's a 5-year plan to start, and in those first 2-3 years, we have it usually nailed down. The last couple of years, there's some flexibility and some changes that occur. If we listed everything in the plan, it would be a really long plan and a really long list. But we can provide, there's probably a way we can provide to the commission at a minimum a list of all the scope projects, but they don't necessarily move into the plan, automatically. And we want to keep public expectation reasonable. They see it in a plan and they go, oh, that's going to happen. It's like, well, it could be years and years away, ultimately.
Justin, one thing about these types of projects, we had them all lumped together in one little category on our work plan and budget, so that it wasn't interfering, if that's the right word, with the rest of the projects in the integrated 5-year work plan. But it was allowing for us to be continually checking in with staff, and usually I did with Paul, to see what the status was of these. But it showed up under core community programs or something like that, and it showed $3 million. How much of it had been spent, we had discussions about that. So if you're worried about the 5 million, and I'm not saying you are, if you're worried at all, any of us, about the 5 million that we budgeted being lost in a spreadsheet, that doesn't have to be the case at all, and I'm sure it won't.
Well, my question is, I hear you, Justin, you want it to be somewhat of a reflection of kind of really what are we thinking and what are we really prioritizing,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And that it's digestible to the community. But at the same time, the things that I'm requesting to scope, they're only a handful. So it's not like I'm giving you a list of 20 projects to all of a sudden be scoped this year, and that would be added totally to the plan. You know what I mean? I'm talking about like 5 potentially projects.
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, absolutely. I think based on what you just said, if it's just adding in those plans, let's say those specific projects to like a future category, we can look at that on a small scale based on the commission's direction. I was thinking you wanted every project we've ever identified moved into the plan. That's what I was responding to. So yes, for example, the projects listed as to be scoped on the spreadsheet, if we want to move those into some sort of future category within the plan, that's not an issue if that's the commission's desire.
And Justin, I I think a way of looking at it too is like there are projects, if you're scoping a corridor and you've got multiple projects, it might happen, and it should happen probably over a period of time, separate projects, but you're scoping the whole corridor. And I think that, for example, the the whole Warm Springs, many of those are on their neighborhood plan, and there's a roundabout at one end. And so there's lots of pieces to it, but you're gonna scope it according to this year, scope out, okay, this is sort of the big picture of its corridor. And then it makes sense that, okay, the real priority along this are these, and we do like Kootenai, we'll phase it in. But you have to, you're approaching it not like these are a lot of little projects, but some of them, as you take them off as chunks, you can prioritize. You know what I'm saying?
Well, Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, I think what you're describing, at least how we would categorize that, is more of a concept effort. Scoping is very specific. There's no public involvement. We're not asking the community to prioritize anything. This is just a technical effort to describe a project, something that we can, put out to bid and go construct. Now, I think on a corridor like Warm Springs, if the desire is to look at the entire corridor and work with the neighborhood to prioritize those projects, remember, we get a neighborhood list, we've got city lists, sometimes they conflict, and sometimes the neighborhood vision isn't extremely clear. That's where a concept effort would kind of step in, and we would be able to discuss some of those elements where there may be some controversy related to some of those projects. We don't know. Our history tells us there will be. Almost always,
Right.
some level of controversy.
And we don't avoid it because we have to deal with it. So that's why I'm surprised you say, well, because that's been a priority for the neighborhood, and I thought for the city, that corridor, and so definitely for the neighborhood. But there's other projects that have been moved up, so we haven't actually dived into the main one that they're most concerned about. Just because it's either big or we haven't developed a concept, and so that's why it troubles me now to hear that if we don't have a concept for the corridor, but we're gonna scope it between now and January. Explain how that's gonna work.
Just
Go ahead, Ryan.
Just one clarification. The recommendation to do a concept comes out of scoping. So as they go out and look in the field and see, is this clear cut or not? When they're looking at it and find that it's not, they will recommend a concept. And so that's a follow-up stage to the scoping effort.
Okay, I'm unclear as to what point. That's where it's hard when the neighbors call me and say, so where are we on this? And I said, well, here's this piece and this piece, but not actually the whole corridor. That's why I really like the Kootenai concept, because it looked at it as a whole corridor. We understood it was big, so we said, we're phasing it in, but we went through the whole process of, I'm gonna use the terms right first, I guess, scoped it, concepted it, and designed it, and now we recognize the big money is in the construction, and, we'll phase it in. We'll do the most important parts first and work towards the rest. And so that's a number of these, what I'm encouraged by saying you're gonna look at the scope.
Yeah, and maybe this will, Commissioner, specifically on this request, Warm Springs Avenue, Broadway to Windsong, which is listed here
Right.
for a scoping effort. Much of this was not requested by the city of Boise. It isn't something that we have ever looked at in detail before. It's very possible that the neighborhood is a priority for them, but it has not shown up on the city's request list or the school district's request list. So when I say we're gonna go scope it, we need to explore all of these comments and all of this idea. We need to go explore what it is. How we implement it or whether a concept is needed, I don't know yet. We will have to look at
Yeah,
that.
there actually are projects on our list to have crossings.
Yes.
Because there's
Yes.
the Manic Bikeway then comes south. And so the crossings at Adams School and Hot Springs and wherever the other points are projects. But so the neighborhood was looking at it and I could totally understand. So you're gonna do these pieces, but without knowing what the concept is for that collector street that you're gonna be building these crossings on and how. So you don't have a concept for the avenue, but you're gonna do projects on, and that's why I said, well, no, it really needs to be addressed as a corridor. And that's why I don't see this as a new request, as a unified request for a number of pieces. And we even designed, and had ITD design their alignment of Old Penitentiary, knowing that out there was a request for a roundabout, and it's still in the works somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, anyway, I don't wanna take up too much time. I'm just trying to figure out at what point we think of things. And maybe it's just, I'm just odd because I keep thinking of these things as corridors and not as little pieces here. And, you know, the way I'm approaching the neighborhood up in Columbia Village is not as a project on a piece of the road, but as a whole system of two collectors that work in that, and the concerns they have of that system, of that corridor. But there are two projects on our list. They're just, neither of them are adequate, but together, plus some other scope or concept, I think we'll get it.
yeah, and, Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, as part of our process, we're taking feedback today, obviously, and we can look into that in more detail. But you're right. I mean, there are times when a project does not encompass the entire, mile or 2 mile corridor, and we're doing crossings that are specific, that a school requests or a city requests for a specific location to cross a road, that are very needed. And if we were to do everything based on a corridor strategy, it would certainly slow down some of those improvements we could do quicker that are just crossing, at a specific location.
I just don't want us to do something without thinking about the corridor. We built a crossing, spent, $500,000, and then we decide, based on, now we're developing a concept for this corridor, this really doesn't fit. Or it's too close to another crossing that would actually work better, but we've already built this, so
Jim,
I just wanna.
we're gonna run out of time.
We are, but that's why I'm glad we had this conversation, because I had a misconception of what concept was.
I have a question.
Yes.
If I could. And thank you. I'm happy to see some of these projects that are accelerating, and I think you do a fantastic job. You've got so much to do, and it's just herding cats. My question is, why we did a resolution? Because I remember at the beginning when we were rolling the 5 million in, and Christy came to us and had the presentation, then it was no wait. We wanted every commissioner to have $1 million to spend in their district. I understand all the conversations and dialogue we've been having. So basically what it boils down to, that's exactly what we're doing, the initial thing that you came, and we're giving you input on things that we would like to see. It's not really, we're taking $1 million and having these projects run parallel to the IFYWP, and these projects are somehow going to jump the line and get done, right? We're just more or less giving you our feedback, kind of like what we alluded to at our last meeting. Give you this, you look at it, see where things fit, and then come back to us with your recommendations, right? That's kind of, it's just kind of, because we keep hearing conversations, no, everybody has $1 million to spend, and I think in reality, that's really not quite how it's all washing out. And so just to be clear what we're doing, so we're just basically giving our input, I think. I don't know.
No, if I can, Mr. President, Commissioner May, if you reread the resolution, and it was explained at the time that it would be very difficult for a lot of projects to be able to get $1 million in every district done within 1 year.
Oh, totally. No, I remember that. I remember that.
And
Yeah,
so
sure.
there was, there's language in there that staff would use their best efforts based upon some criteria.
Absolutely.
To do their best. And so, to that extent, there's a little bit of limitation, but that shouldn't, if you identify projects that you want to be included, then go ahead and include those.
Which
and
we've
you may end
done.
up with shell projects where it may take a couple of years.
Yeah.
But
So we're basically giving the input, because I know there's been some confusion with the constituency where, we've gotten emails or I've gotten calls, oh, Commissioner, when you spend that $1 million, would you take a look at this? And so there has been a little bit of misinformation or misinterpretation out there. So I just want to just make sure that everybody's on the same page, and this is what we're doing. We're providing these inputs and suggestions to staff. They're going to look at it, jiggle around and see what we can do. But it's not just everybody has $1 million and this is what we're
And
using.
if I can, Commissioner, we're gonna use our best efforts, and that's language what.
Right, and
to
yeah,
try and
without
get
a
those-
doubt.
Get those projects programmed and completed.
Right.
But yes, that is it's just the
But
reality.
that's
of
really
project
the,
development.
right, and that's kind of what Christy tried to say at that initial meeting, I think, when you first came to us. And
Right,
so,
and I did
yeah.
provide a handout
Yeah.
of the projects that we had available to accelerate for construction,
right,
as well as design projects to accelerate into 22.
Commissioners, when Christie gets to her slides, she's gonna do exactly that. If here are the projects that you have suggested, here's the impact if you want those. And so in a slide or two, we're gonna get into some
Right.
of those impacts.
right. So it's just like I say, more suggestion to you, and you guys look at it and come back to us with,
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioner May, I think the best way to describe it is, staff has two documents we bring forward to you every year. The ACHD annual budget and the ACHD integrated five-year work plan. There is no other document we have. All of the programming and the allocation of funds that's approved by the commission happens through those two documents. We do that for transparency, consistency, for a whole lot of reasons. And so that's why when we come to you with all this process information and all this discussion of who, where's what, and how we bring it forward to you either through a budget amendment, or through the adoption of the integrated five-year work plan. So what we're doing right now is trying to get your input so that we can revise the current draft of the integrated five-year work plan
which
to
you've done so many
represent.
times just to today.
No, it's okay,
and,
but that's
yeah,
part of what we.
You do a fantastic job doing that.
And our goal
so I
is
just-
to represent all these comments within the
Right.
draft that you will potentially adopt in the coming months.
Super, that's what I thought, I just wanted to get it out there.
Thank you, Commissioner, for doing that, and I appreciate the clarification.
So just to close this out, other things and that staff looked at very carefully based on, internal discussions. There's always this desire to do more and more, and we understand that and are committed to do as much as we possibly can. One of the things we hear a lot is, well, we just need to contract all of this work out, whether that's project management or design or whatever these issues are. I just want to highlight, specifically for FY22, it's very full from a staff workload perspective. A typical year for ACHD from a design, for a budgeted design year is $6 to $8 million. So in your adopted 22 budget, your fiscal year 22 budget, it's almost $18 million. So we've already really expanded that category within fiscal year 22. So that's why most of the recommendations you're going to see, some of it, when we get through the scoping effort and bring it back to you in January, there may be some things we can do. I don't know. We're gonna tell you that, and we're gonna keep you totally looped in on all that. Much of the recommendations are falling 23 and after, just because of the heavy load that is already existing within 2022. And I also just want to highlight that, in our conversations with the major consulting firms here in the Valley, many of them are also at capacity. Specifically ITD, because of an influx of funding through the state legislature that they received, they have put out millions and millions of dollars worth of design contracts in the last 3 months. One of their design contracts for a large project, for example, is $35 million. That's twice the size of our entire design budget here at the Ada County Highway District. So there's market forces at play that impact our ability to on an annual basis to do certain things. That being said, once again, we move forward, with doing the best we can and putting out as much work as we possibly can to keep these projects moving forward. Another thing that we have always talked about internally, there's this, it's a stress point sometimes in the project process is how much public involvement is needed, for a project. And ACHD does a lot of public involvement. You see all the things we do. We're doing surveys, and we go out and do open houses and online open houses, and we're putting up pictures and graphs, and everyone can see everything we're planning. The reason we do that is that previous commission direction has been, we want to be as transparent as possible. These projects impact people's lives, and we want to really take all that out there. It adds quite a bit into the project timeline of design specifically to do all of that public involvement work. We think it's necessary. It is, if you want to shorten the process, that's one of the ways to do it, is do less of that type of activity. It's not staff's recommendation, but I did want to bring it up, that it's always something that we're trying to balance in the project process. And then you'll see this, and I'll hand it over to Christy now, not take any more time here. But when it comes to design delays, a lot of the things you'll see that we recommend are based on this kind of first in, last in, first out approach, which is if it's something that's kind of out in the program and we've recently moved it in, that's the kind of thing that when Christy was doing the recommendations, those are the things that we decided to delay, or we, through the staff analysis, we're proposing to delay as part of this process. So,
Justin, how many shelf projects do we have in the design process now, approximately?
So as of today, we put out our last shelf project for construction, which is Christine Street, and the commission approved that this year to go forward with that project, and that's going to be coming. The bid was it awarded, Diane? I can't remember. So not yet, but it's coming out very soon. So it's going to be built relatively quickly. That was our final community program shelf project. So one of the reasons we're doing this big push in design in FY22 specifically is to rebuild that list. And to have projects that are designed, the right-of-way is complete, and if we have the funding, we can pull them forward. It's difficult to do that, but that's why you see that large effort in FY22.
So other than the community projects, how many?
There's
a large number of projects?
No, it's a very small number, if any. There may be a bridge or two coming up here that we're going to have complete in the next several months. But other than that, there's no major capital project that is ready to go. If you said we had $8 million or something like that, go build this project, we don't have any.
I'm just curious, so you could find out and let me know.
I'll look into that.
Okay,
and provide that.
thanks.
So with that being said, unless there's any questions for me going forward, I'll hand it over to Christy, and she's going to get into the specifics.
I don't, but I do have a suggestion for you, Christy, in the interest of time. One of the sections of the various district by district sheets that you put together is maintaining current IFYWP timeline, where you have a number of things, at least in mine, that says out of district commission requests. Why don't we not deal with those today?
Mr. President, those are not part of my presentation.
Good.
My presentation is focusing primarily on these particular categories, which is the scoping efforts, acceleration delays, but the maintain timeline, that is just on here to discuss what that is. But that's not part of the presentation because staff analysis is to leave those alone. How they are currently in the draft. So.
Well, you have a couple like in mind that they were in that category, but it said request for acceleration, no changes because it's scheduled already for 2022.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And that's throughout. There's several.
Yep.
They're throughout. So I apologize. I was trying to talk louder, and I'm pretty sure I asked the director to make sure none of you guys had spears before I started, so that there's no target behind me. Correct? Okay, good. So what I'll just be getting into, and I'll go briefly through each commission district. We won't get into too much. We've been provided handouts that give you more information as to if there's a project scoping. Those are ones that are like we consider new projects that we've not looked at before, that we will add to our scoping efforts this year, with the target date of January 22 to complete that. The projects that are listed under the category project acceleration, these are ones that you commissioners have asked for a particular project to be accelerated. Obviously not every project request for acceleration is in this category because some we just can't accelerate because there's nothing to move out. And then project delays. So if something is requested to be accelerated, then that means something would have to be delayed. And so staff analysis is providing what that would look like. These are the projects. Obviously, this is a very high level review that we're doing with this. Once we get direction from this commission as to what they would like to do with this, we will do a further analysis and get them into the program and really look at the dollars. We try to do that, but a week is not a lot of time to do that, so we will do that more in detail. And then obviously maintain timeline. Those are requests that we just provided more information for. Maybe there were some that you had asked for acceleration 22, we're already doing a concept in 22, so we can't accelerate it. Or there's just not something else that can be moved out. So for all of these, when we were looking at acceleration and delays, because likely that's what we're gonna focus on in these upcoming slides, these were by commission district. So if Commissioner May, you asked for a project to be accelerated, I only looked at projects within your district to delay. So I didn't go to Commissioner Pickering's district and say, well, I'm gonna delay 5 of hers. It was very commissioner district specific when we were looking at this, because we thought that was the best way to analyze this and provide you feedback. So for Commissioner District 1, Commissioner Hanson, so what we looked at is there were 3 projects that we added to our scoping efforts for 22 to be done in January. There were 5 project acceleration requests, which resulted in potential project delays of 4 projects. And I did try to look at the dollars. If we could get 2 design projects out of 1 that's going to be delayed, then I tried to minimize as much as possible. Sometimes there were more. You'll find as we get to some of these other ones. So, and some of these, it's on your sheets. It specifically calls out for the acceleration what staff analysis came up with. If you were asking for 24 or 23, we tried to get as close to that as we could. Some of them that we couldn't. For example, Commissioner Hanson, on your several of yours, like the Victory, the Woodbine, those had actually originally moved out of the program. So there was no year to either switch with. They were only in design originally as 26. And so we tried to move those back in. The closest we could get, I think, on those was 26 design. Commissioner District 2. Pickering's, these were the ones we looked at adding 4 projects to our scoping efforts, 3 projects to the acceleration, and then it equated to, in essence, 3 delays of those projects. Again, by commission district, also by program type. So if you're looking at community programs projects, we looked at the community programs. We can't really delay an impact fee eligible project for community programs projects. Commissioner District 3, Commissioner May, we added this, the Star Road Borealis, that's next to the Star Elementary School. We just called out the specific extents of the project. So that one was added, it will be added to our scoping efforts. Acceleration, you'd requested 5th and 6th Street, and the State Street and Pierce Park. And so 5th and 6th Street, there is a potential for some funding from CCDC, but there still would be ACHD funding that would be needed. And that actually, and because 5th and 6th Street, it's not a capital project. It's not a capital, it's a community programs project because it's under the economic development category, which is a community programs
And
category.
they were going to talk to you about deferring some other projects, and they haven't.
So these are the ones, the city of Boise had put forward Broadway. They'd also put forward 13th Street. At our previous meeting, you specifically said you weren't supportive of 13th Street necessarily getting delayed.
I think 13th and Franklin.
Yes.
The crossing right by Boise High. Yeah, that's
so
little.
I didn't look at that one, so I looked at what other options are there. So these were the other options. So because the 5th and 6th Street is a larger project, a little bit more money, there were multiple project delays that would have to occur through our analysis in order to do that one. And then State Street, Pierce Park, the other option we looked at was Linder and Floating Feather roundabout. That one is in construction in 24, 25. So that's what would have to, and that was the only intersection or capital improvement project anywhere in that time frame within your district that could be moved in order for State Street to be moved up. And talking to our project team, State Pierce Park, I think you had originally asked for 24, but generally speaking, with the right-of-way and everything, we didn't feel comfortable with that one moving all the way up to 24. Because we're just starting to
25,
design.
yeah.
Thank you, Christy. Of course. Commissioner District.
Christy,
Yes.
as you start, the second one there, the Valley Street,
Yes.
as I've been driving the neighborhood right around there, I noticed there's a paved sidewalk on both sides of the street, almost completely between Lake Hazel and Amity, except for about 300 yards. Can you add that to the scoping?
I'd be happy to, sir.
Thank you.
Yes. So, and Commissioner Goldthorpe's district, we looked at now 3 scoping efforts that we'll add to that list. Acceleration, you would specifically ask for Valley Street Penn Crossing. That is part of the entire corridor. And so staff's recommendation or their analysis, would be a potential delay of maybe Lake Hazel, because it is a capital improvement project. We get that crossing with that. We don't really want to separate that out. So we looked at accelerating that with that delay. And then Victory and Cannon Arrow, that's a community programs project with another community programs project. There were several on your list, I'm sure you saw. We actually completed those as part of the commission directive.
Well, that's why I brought this.
Happy dance, things are done.
See, these are from 2018 and 19.
So they were before.
And yes, and
Before the fix
they
of the
were part
duns.
of that initial $3 million.
You did have me questioning my sanity slightly. Because I
kinda
saw those and
special.
I'm like, I
Yeah.
swear, because I live right out there, so
I
I'm
know,
like, I swear
yeah.
we did that. I'm driving around, no, we did do that. And I'm like, oh my goodness, my
Well, it's been
brain.
a long time since I quizzed anybody on it, so I wasn't sure.
Well, there, I got it right.
So just to show folks that we do have the capability of keeping track of the money that we budget for certain things, and maybe only a little bit more frequent reporting, and then I'm good to go.
Okay, perfect. And then Commissioner District 5, Commissioner McKinney's district, and so we looked to add one project to the scoping efforts, Project Acceleration, Maple Grove and Edna project. That's one that's at community programs, and so when we looked at that, the analysis, we had one that we could likely move back, which was the McMillan Road, Cortana to Goddard Creekway. Now you may see some of these, there were requests from some commissioners for districts that were not theirs. They're all on the list, we're keeping track of all of them, but we really did not focus our efforts on acceleration on those requests. We focused our attention on, if May is requesting acceleration, those are the ones I'm gonna look at before I'm gonna look at something that somebody else may have requested in her district. So they were all on the list, we're still keeping track of them, we still look at them, but we did not choose to focus on those.
Yeah,
given
just
our
know that
timeframe.
those are probably coming from neighborhood associations that overlap two districts.
Oh, I'm
So-
sure, yeah.
so like I represent South Cole neighborhood, but so does Kent, and so some of I just represent a little sliver of it, but so I think and there's a couple of neighborhood associations that Commissioner Pickering and I also
Right.
overlap. And of
Yeah,
course,
and even Pickering and McKinney, you guys
yeah,
had
so
some
we,
overlap
so
as
to the
well.
extent you say, hey, this corridor, even though the corridor technically, or 80% of it's not in my district, it's important to them, so I think it's sort of understanding, okay,
Right.
this.
But
we
yeah, and
arbitrarily have to draw a line for a commission
Yeah.
district.
And it's not that these
With the
comments
corridor,
aren't going
yeah.
to be looked at or reviewed or, evaluated, it's just with the specific acceleration, there were some specific limits on what could be accelerated.
Oh,
So
yeah,
if,
yeah.
Commissioner Pickering had 4 that she wanted accelerated and 3 came in from another commissioner, and I didn't have enough projects to delay, hers would get priority in her commission district. So that's what we were looking at. So a summary of what the changes looked like. 11 projects were added to our scoping effort for January 22, now 12. 13 project accelerations based on your requests. 14 project delays to accommodate said requests. And then 57 projects to maintain their current schedule in the integrated 5-year work plan. So what do we need from you?
Christine?
Yes.
One last question. On mine, you had for possible project delays, the section on Lake Hazel over to Cole,
Yes.
which you're already doing this, I'm sure, but I just need some reassurance. There's a lot of development proposed for that area. We haven't seen the plats and things like that really yet. But as that moves forward, rather than just create a parking lot, maybe we could just keep our eyes on those, so maybe that
Yeah.
would wind up being accelerated if we can get the
Yeah,
impact
Mr.
fees
President,
and other things.
through our annual report that we do every year, the Southwest Boise area continues to come to the top as being a hot spot of need, including the Lake Hazel corridors. So for sure, that is definitely something that we continue to look at. So what we're asking from the commissioners today is, does staff have your approval to revise the current draft plan as presented and move forward with public engagement? So we provided you guys with staff analysis. Obviously, we'd have to do some further as we get a little more into the weeds with it. But we need direction on, Are you guys going to need another work session on this? Are you guys good? Do I have an action to move forward with the draft with these changes to go out to public engagement?
I would propose that the commission consider this with regards to what we've got to scope, that of course we say, yeah, by all means, get that scoped. And that when we receive a scoping report, if not before, we have another, it doesn't have to be today or tomorrow, or, but we have another meeting that we would actually, what would actually result is us evaluating that and then possibly giving some more direction.
Well, the scoping effort is the one that will be completed in January.
Right, yes.
So are you saying that you want to delay the adoption of the integrated 5-year work plan until January, or are we
No.
just skipping this year?
Right, yeah, I'm real popular today, aren't
No, I need to
No.
move forward with the 22-26. The scoping efforts will still continue to go forward, and I think that is a great conversation for us to have with the 23-27 update. And I think this format, moving forward with the 5-year work plan next year, will be a great
Then
format
I
to
think
get
each
your
commissioner ought to
input.
give their opinion.
Yes.
And just prior to that, Commissioner, I do wanna, we will be coming back to you with more detailed information on those scoping projects. And if there's some things that come out of that we can accelerate or move on, that can happen through the budget adjustment process, as we've done in the past with previous projects of that type. So there's kind of a parallel track. There's the larger idea of updating the integrated 5-year work plan and letting that go out to public involvement. And at the same time, we'll be moving forward as quickly as possible on those projects listed as scoping. And so they can happen on a parallel track. So just wanted to make that clear.
How about we get opinions from Mary, Alexis, Dave, and then Jim?
You've been,
Well, I'm, personally with the, looking at the effects of the requests and so on in my district, I'm not entirely satisfied with, what I've got here. I'd like to get a little more information on some of this, before saying, yeah, let's go forward with it. So, that's my position.
And that's consistent with what you were just saying, to delay it a little.
We could, if you want to delay this, like, you need some more information. You could
Yeah.
probably get it within a week, correct?
Right.
Okay. Mary, how about you?
I would be fine with that.
Okay, Alexis?
Yeah, I would, I think I really just appreciate you guys laying this out by district, how you organized all of that. I think this helps us make really, informed decisions. And I think I really appreciate the project delays, how you've listed it all out. The only thing that similar to the other commissioners, Osage, I really want more information about what we can actually do there before I agree to the integrated 5-year work plan. So I think we don't need, my opinion is we don't need another work session. I can work with staff and leadership to figure out what that looks like.
This really has been a great input, and I really like our new format, because I think I've certainly learned a lot about the whole process, and I think it's really been helpful for the people that have tuned in too. So I think this has really been beneficial.
So before Jim tells us what he thinks, Steve, I got a question for you. When, Dave and Mary both said they would like a week to ask questions, analyze something, can they say, okay, I'm happy now? Or do we have to vote on something as a group?
Well, I don't think it's right yet if you've got outstanding issues.
Well, I know, but when they're no longer
When they're
having.
satisfied and they can work with staff offline, and then we can have another meeting. I know we had a October 1 goal to have this done, but
We could address it up there as an action item.
you don't have a commission meeting next week.
Right.
We can hold another workshop to do that, or you can wait till the first week in October.
I think October 1, I think if we just come back with a finalized version that you've all talked to each of us, and we can vote on that on October 1st, and I think that works great.
And I think that this is such a valuable tool to have, but we did get it just a couple hours before the meeting. So to really feel satisfied that you can really digest and take a good look at it, I would really be in favor of
But I think
October
staff
1st.
can,
Yeah.
if
Then we
you
can
get
just call
the
you.
additional input from Commissioner McKinney and any other commissioner during that time, they can analyze that, and then they can bring that as part of that first meeting in October where you would vote on it.
And we'll
Then you
have,
can make amendments at that time.
and we'll have an extra week to give all of us some time to do
Yeah.
that. So you guys have been under the gun to produce all of this stuff so quickly and figuring it out with our
All these
schedules. So I
iterations
think not having a meeting next
We
week,
just did one last
jumping
week.
next week works out really well.
Well, and in the spirit of that, we do have, staff's recommending some revised timeframes. Because to turn around, if you guys took action today, to get to that October 1st, that would give staff 1 week to update all the maps, do all the project lists, update all the tie-in to the map. It's significant amount of lift for staff in 1 week to get that done. So, having said that, without having clear direction today, even a week is not enough time. So staff, we talked about updating this timeline and pushing this out further so that we have time, you guys are comfortable with your direction on this, and then give staff time to actually create the plan again. So this next steps that we were looking at was staff would have the month of October, depending on which direction we received at what time frame to do that, to get everything updated, and then go out to the public November 1st, give them the 2-week period, the public and partner agencies. I come back in December 1st for an update on what we heard from the public, and then a tentative adoption hearing of December 15th. I would have done it the week before, but it's my birthday week, so I said no.
Christy, could you, so I've been chatting with, this entire process of how I got these priorities and all that. I've been talking to my neighborhood associations, and they're wanting to know when this, the public comment period opens. So, and I'm probably not gonna remember, so could you just email us that,
absolutely.
with this confirmed time, because yes, you guys need your time to do that, so.
We were very hopeful with the original time frame, but we also want to make sure that this process is fully vetted and we get you the information and we get information from you guys. So we just felt this was a better timeline to go with. But yes, I'm more than happy to send this to you.
Thank
Jim,
Sorry,
you
I
okay
didn't
with
mean
this?
to jump in front of.
I think this is terrific. Obviously, I appear to be the one who keeps sending you more things, and I require hours of your time in March when we first do this, so none of these are sort of concepts coming from me are new. The question is, when it gets out there and the neighbors look at it, they'll say, but I've been telling you about this, this, and this, and it's not described on there. At least some of them are gonna be thrilled. I know, for example, there was no reference to railroad crossings at Milan and Victory, and I think that's so critical to that neighborhood, just seeing it on there. The issue, so I have no problem moving forward with this. The issue arises when a design comes to us, and we've seen this happen in the past, where a design gets to us, or a design contract, or I say, let's talk about this design contract, and I say, why aren't we doing this? And you say, well, it wasn't scoped. We can't ask the contractor to do this because we didn't scope it. So I keep wanting to know, when is the point at which we say, here's the concerns for this neighborhood, or these are the issues that should be evaluated, and so that I don't want to get down the false expectations that, okay, the concerns that have been raised had a full and fair opportunity to be evaluated, and this is why they're not going to be part of this process. So I don't know where, because I'll just end up being the one that trips up the process when a design contract comes forward, and I'll say, why wasn't this scoped? If we're, sending out a $500,000 contract, but I just need to know when that is. I'm glad there is more communication here, and I really like in that early slide you had improved commissioner communications to sort of get to know what might, in other words, what might trip us up later on if it's not addressed early.
And Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, that is the intent of our enhanced and coordinated scoping effort, is to have that more opportunities for the commission to review not only the scoping list, but the scope statements that are created as part of a project. I can't guarantee we're always gonna perfectly align with, what exactly the neighborhood said. I can't guarantee that, but what I can guarantee is we'll give you, as commissioners, the opportunity to weigh in on what a project is earlier on than maybe you have in the past.
Yeah, that's basically all I'm asking for. So that when, it's like, wow, you went ahead and put a crossing in, but we still have these issues further down. Christy and I had this conversation on Rose Hill, sort of a concept for Rose Hill that really works, even though the initial phase is, well, we're only gonna address fixing the intersection. And the neighborhoods were like, no, we have issues on the corridor. So that's the only way, and you probably can predict based upon these, all the input I give, which areas, if something gets left out. How was I described? The obnoxious commissioner will come forward
I
and
believe you
say,
said nuisance.
the one you can probably hear from, only because I will probably hear from one of my 13 neighborhood associations, why haven't you addressed this? Because in our conversations with you, you said you would. So, the buck always stops with us. It starts with us and it stops with us. And so that is the downside, or the flip side of having good communications with your neighborhoods, is they build expectations that there's gonna be somewhere in that process that we will either say, this is why we considered and can't do it, and they understand and I can communicate it back, or this is how we're gonna include it. And so it's a long-winded way of saying, I have no problem moving forward on this time frame and go for it, because the issues will be raised in the context in which you've laid them out. And I really appreciate that, and actually everybody's eager to get to that map, because I've told them, wait a minute, wait until, I'll let you know, the moment the map is live, you can log in.
I know, it's still blocked off.
Yeah, people are so
But we can still secretly look at it.
You guys have the secret passcodes, yes.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to share.
Okay, move forward. And if you, I will give you a few more things in the interim. I'm meeting with some folks in Columbia Village this week, so.
Mr. President, is there any limit?
Yeah, actually, all you need to do is
Can we
I'll
put a cap on it?
I'll reschedule the meeting and I'll just leave Jim out of the inbox. Okay. So, having been notified of that and seeing that we've actually got like 11 and a half minutes, is there any problem with me adjourning this?
So the plan is to come back to the commission October
Yes.
6th? Is that the next?
Yep.
First off,
And- Okay.
and to go with this revised
Yeah.
schedule.
Yes, with the revised schedule, and then we'll get final
Alright.
thumbs up or thumbs down on what I provided.
Consensus.
That being the case, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chris.
Thank you.
All your hard work.
And there were no spears?
No spirit, no.
Then we, metal Commissioner Hanson off.
I left my blower gun at home.
You left your blow dart, I'm so glad that you left your blow dart gun at home.
Just want to make sure you were able to. You said you were happy with your list. Yeah.
Well, and part of it also is that
said you wouldn't let me.
Pickering?
Oh, I mean, I'm mic'd up, but they can't see me, but that's fine. Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. President, it's 5:30 pre-commission.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to the Ada County Highway District, our pre-commission meeting. And we will begin by asking the commissioners if they have any comments or questions about anything on the agenda.
Mr. President,
Yes.
there are a couple of items on the consent agenda that I just have a couple of questions on. I don't necessarily think they ought to be removed from the consent agenda, but if we could get a couple of questions answered,
Go ahead.
I would like that. Shall I just ask them now?
Yes.
Okay. Items 4 and 5, these interagency agreements for sewer improvement and so on. In reading the staff report and the information, it was still a little unclear to me the portion of the cost that will be paid by ACHD on these. Some of them indicated that the project is being paid by ITD or by the city of Boise. Just wanted to clarify that to make sure I'm clear on what the respective cost allocation is on those two.
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, you're speaking about 4 and 5 on the consent agenda, correct?
Right.
Okay, these are proposed interagency agreements with the city of Boise and the city, and then the West Boise Sewer District Direct. The cost associated with the first one is $3,500. The second is $4,500.
That's the ACHD portion.
No, that's the portion, but to fully be refunded by Boise and the West Boise Sewer District. So it's a zero cost if those are agreed to.
I see, okay, because I saw some much larger numbers and was confused.
We're putting them into our projects in that area. Those may be the numbers you saw.
So the larger number, that's our project
Our
that's
projects,
going on.
right.
The smaller number was the amount for this specific portion that's being reimbursed by the other agencies.
Yes, sir, if
Okay.
they agree to the interagency agreement. Yes.
Okay, all right, then items 8 and 9, my simple question is, these cost amounts, how do they compare to our previous contracts for these same services?
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, on number 8, the estimate was, the estimate was $100,000. And our current contractor came in at the $2,000 and a little bit over that, which is very, very close. And again, as the staff report indicated, they are our current group. We're very happy with them, and they, out of the 3 that bid, received the top amount of points from the selection team. And it was not a blind vote. It was we knew who the different organizations were.
Okay,
And then number 9.
well, wait, on number 8, you said 100,000, it's
That was-
saying 112,000.
Yes, the estimate was going to be $100,000.
Oh, okay,
The low responsive bid that came in was
112,000.
yes, so it was 2,000 over. So again, we think that's pretty close.
And is that, and what's, again, how does that compare to the cost what we've paid for previous
Jennifer?
years for these services?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, it's comparable to what we're paying this year. The cost did go up a little bit. They didn't want to piggyback because we knew the costs were going to be going up because of labor costs increasing over time. And we've added some additional services for COVID cleaning, et cetera.
Okay, all right, good. And then number 9?
Jennifer, you can stay right here. And such, again, this was a single bid from Dyna, which is AKA Napa Auto Parts. They have a pretty good lock on this type of support across the Ada County. But Jennifer?
Again, very comparable to what we have for this year. It's kind of an as needed. It's based on the price of parts as they come, but
Okay.
it's comparable.
So when you say comparable, like we're within 5% or something like that?
Christine, do you have the budget open? Do you know? I don't have the numbers in front of me.
You don't have the entire budget memorized?
She does though.
Surprised.
Comparable.
And she thought we were through. Stump Christine time.
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney. So the percentage of markup on the items is comparable to prior years because it's based on a markup of a select basket of items, and then it's just on an as-needed basis. But we have budgeted an appropriate amount based on historical.
Okay, so the not to exceed amount is simply that as things go along.
Correct.
We pay as we go.
Right.
The
right.
prices change. Okay, very good. Thank you. I appreciate the information.
And I understand that on some of the items that are a little harder to get logistically speaking, when we need one, we'll buy two.
Yes, sir. We've had a good discussion on that, and we do very well on just-in-time logistics.
Yeah.
However, as I think I shared with the commission, we are seeing critical parts on some of the bigger machines that are breaking, and it's taking a month and a half to 2 months to get that part in. So we're going to be expanding the on-the-shelf operations for those critical parts, generally sweepers, dump trucks, and back trucks. So they're complex pieces of machinery. The F-150s, 250s, 350s, 550s, we can work around to keep them going. But those bigger pieces of equipment are, we want to increase our bench stock a little bit, just as we've done with the PPE, to ensure that we can keep going without having to wait for parts, which is occurring across the entire nation.
Mr.
And
President?
then I would like, I'm sorry, Commissioner, I was going to say, we do have a request, if you would please move item 6 on the consent agenda to the regular agenda, and I'd like to recommend item 3 on the regular agenda for that.
Item 3 as well?
No, make item
Put it-
6 on the consent, 3 on the regular agenda, on your motion.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Thank you, Director, for that, request. That was one of mine as well. I do have, one question on consent item number 3. Basically, it's just, roadway and ADA improvements, state and local agreement with ITD. I read through it, the whole thing, Director, and it was not clear which projects would be designed with these funds. Is there a list somewhere or TBD? I'm just really curious.
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering. So it is actually to be determined. We're at the very beginning of our process with ITD to get this project going. And so we have to enter this state and local agreement. Once we get this executed, we're able to then look at the budget, work with our pavement management team and look at the project needs and define a list of projects. You'll actually see that list when we come back with another action on this item. So it's not your last chance to see what we're doing on this project. This is a procedural step with ITD to get the money obligated.
Oh, that's helpful, Justin. So do you guys just come up with that list together, or is it based off of some other list that we all talk about and prioritize?
So, Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, we have a very detailed asset management program that helps us select the segments that need these types of pavement treatments. When we select those segments, we also look at the sidewalk gaps, the other necessary upgrades from our neighborhood plan efforts and other things to incorporate those into the projects. And all of that is happening, but it happens after we get the process started with ITD.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Then we'll go ahead for the Director's Administrative Report.
Mr. President, Commissioners, good afternoon. First off, I know a very popular topic, but flu shots. We've made it very easy again this year for the entire team and for you. We've partnered with Walgreens. They'll be here October 6th. October 6th is becoming a very big date, and such from 7 to 9:30, and October 13th from 2 to 3:30. And then if you would like to attend, it's all part of the things we got. If you'd either let Stacy or me know, we will schedule a time for you that's convenient for you to participate in this. Now, as with our biometrics and health fairs, there are a couple rules of engagement when we bring these outside agencies in. First off, you all must be masked. for the flu shot. You must maintain social distancing. We'll make sure that occurs. It will be in the Adams broom shed and such. You must be able to answer a series of questions, of COVID-related questions, and you'll have your temperature checked before you get into the flu shot line. And please, as we stress with all of our team members, please arrive at your designated time and such, because we are managing the distancing and the spacing to ensure maximum safety for everybody involved. So if you're interested in participating here, please let us know and we'll make sure that you have a time to do that. In front of you, I gave you the most current ACHE recruiting and retention initiative summary, and that is in front of you. We're very pleased to, again, share with you that we've completed, and again, thank you, all but two. Those two are in the works today, and those two are daycare stipend and the FTO conversion to 401k. We are working that. We believe that we will have those both completed in November timeframe going forward. So again, greatly appreciate the support you've given us on all of those retention and recruiting initiatives here at the Ada County Highway District. For COVID-19, as I said earlier, the PPA bench stock is at 5 months, and such, so we're fully prepared for all and any operations across the board. This week, we have 18 members that have been proactively quarantined for possible secondary exposure, and we have 2 of the 8 that are quarantined coming out of their positive testing regime. So we're doing very, very well. Building and equipment continues to be fogged, as I shared with you earlier, for sanitation issues. And we have instituted A&B operations, as we did during the pandemic, for our team to, again, minimize exposures across the board and, to the best of our ability, minimize the impacts of bringing down an entire crew if someone is test positive across the board. And as of yesterday, going forward until further notice, all of the all staffs will be via Zoom and such. Again, in deference to safe operations for all of the crew members. And next one will be next week. I'll make sure that you have the time. I believe it's Tuesday, Stacy, correct? At 8 a.m. And if you would like to participate, we'll have the Zoom information for you. Commissioners, we all recently received a tell-us regarding parents' concerns for the Black Cat gondola ped crossing. Do you all remember seeing that from the parents at all? Okay. I want to let you know that I sent you an interim. We saw this. And as a result, West Ada, after some discussions, will expand the walk boundary and such. So they are seeking to hire a consultant to design the pedestrian crossing now at Black Cat and with school zone flashers. Our staff will be meeting with them shortly, again, to discuss parameters on this for safety operations. Now, obviously, this is going to take a little bit of time because we've got to get a consultant, but with our staff's urging and help that we will offer, they are moving forward and addressing the parents' concerns. So we'll keep you posted on that.
I have a question about that. Where are they on the timeline that we had originally expected this to be done?
Sir, that will be part of the discussion that we're going to have with them as we get closer to that operation. But
so we're thinking it's a little bit after the fact that should have been addressed? Okay, well, I understand.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Pickering, you asked for an update on the flashing yellow. Sir, I'd like to let you know that we are scheduled to receive our first shipment of 20 replacement controllers this Friday, another 20 by October 1st, and then we are scheduled to receive additional shipments of 25 controllers every 2 weeks until all 215 have been replaced. Once we have received the new controllers, we will begin installing them as they come in, and we'll most likely be doing this during night conditions because we'll have to put the flashers in four-way plus, so probably doing that on rush hour you're gonna get phone calls. And so, our team will be doing it at night, where there's light traffic, and, but we'll keep you posted, again, to make sure we're doing that as well.
Great news. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great news.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Director Wong, could you remind me, what's the issue with the flashers?
The controller systems that we purchased did not work. They did not integrate as well as the manufacturer said they were going to do. So we've been in concert with them, and over at the Traffic Management Center, I think you've been over there, we have the system set up where we can actually put a controller, there's a controller box out there, and our technicians can actually play with the systems there as opposed to being out in the field. So between us and the manufacturer, I'll go out on a limb and say we figured it out, and we've sent all of our controllers back so they can reprogram and fix them. They're coming back now. We'll install it at that point.
Okay,
Yep.
great, thank you.
Again, Gary's team over at Traffic Ops and stuff just were phenomenal in continuing to dog this to make this work. Commissioners, we continue to get more companies coming to Ada County for fiber optics installations. This is a heads up. The latest is Google, who is working to provide fiber connectivity for residences. Now, they are planning 5.5 million feet of fiber installation, which is over 1,040 miles of fiber here. Development Technical Services is developing a plan to oversee all the fiber permits over the next several years. And these are my words, to best mitigate past and current issues with one company and such. We will keep you posted on this, but I want to make sure you knew that this is going to be a big push through Ada County, and that's a lot of miles of fiber going forward. Commissioner Pickering again. You last week made a suggestion that there may be better ways for us to provide more holistic feedback on how we are doing as an agency, as opposed to the monthly here's all the things we built and such. And of course, we are still looking toward a survey of some sorts. However, our tremendous communications team took this to heart, and we believe, one thought, and we'd like to throw it out to the commission here, is that we believe we can leverage our very impressive social media platforms that we now have and do what I'm going to call a single question of the week, question of the month that the commission would like to have. Put that out on social media, Nextdoor, Twitter, all these different things, and receive feedback, which I think will be quick with a lot of people, because those are the platforms that they're using right now to come back to the commission and give you, well, here's what the community has suggested about the question that you wanted answered or raised, or insight, so to speak. Now, some will say this is not scientific because we won't be asking your age, your date of birth, how many cars you drive, this sort of stuff. But it in my opinion, it enhances the public's ability to respond, because we are not asking them to sit down for 20, 25 minutes to answer an entire series of questions to get to maybe one or two or three of the major points that you'd like to know. So we think that this is better than the call center sort of thing. I do know that there are a few other agencies that have played with this and have gotten some pretty good results, again, on key questions. How do you like the Eagle Amity roundabout? Or how are we doing on this process, or what do you want to see? And so, like I said, if you're okay with this, I have no intention of replacing our formal survey with this at all. This supplements, in my opinion, that formal survey, but it also provides you, I believe, a quicker feedback loop on that one question of the week, bi-week, monthly, whatever that's going to be going forward. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Bruce, would we be boosting it out? That's a Facebook term, I think. Where's our communications people?
She's right back there.
Would we be boosting that out to get it in front of literally tens of thousands of people instead of just our normal following? Of course there is, but it's very cheap.
But to your point, Commissioner, that's what's so great about social media is you can literally do all of these demographic elements where we know that it's very unlikely that somebody in Canyon County would be participating because we're zeroing in on a particular neighborhood, certain type of, parents and kiddos in West Ada. Yeah, so a lot of those analytics are available, which is what's so great about social media.
And again, Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, this can be targeted, again, neighborhood associations, next door, or just, as you said, blast it out and such. We believe that we would get a wider response, we get a quicker response, and it would be targeted specifically to the specific questions that the commission believes would be important to understand what the public's feedback is. So that's our thought on, based on what your thought or recommendation or request was for last week.
Well, Mr. President, if you don't mind. So I just want to say thank you, Director, for just ruminating on it and having an idea already. I just commend you for that. I really like the idea, especially if we can brand it as something that's beyond this just willy-nilly question of the week, right? It's actually substantial and it means something, and we're going to be keeping an eye on it, and it's going to be consistent. So I think as long as our amazing team can come up with some really cool branding, that sounds great, and I'm happy to work with you or our team to kind of start thinking about what questions we would want to ask.
Thank you.
You mean the brand, instead of being like question of the week, something like your opinion matters?
Or like how does, this is more of a question and not a slogan, but again, like, why is transportation important to you, or what aspects of transportation are important to you, and what elements of transportation protect your quality of life, or what impacts your quality of life? And it could be things that, again, how we ask the questions is like 90% of the work, but coming up with a more holistic type of slogan or branding, to your point, Commissioner, will be a lot more inviting.
Good idea.
Well, I'm not too sure how to operationalize it, so I'm trying to get my head around it. That's an old head. But one of the things that is helpful is when I speak to people in the neighborhood and they say they feel this corridor is just unsafe. They just don't feel safe. So we send our engineers say, well, it doesn't meet warrants for this, and you have to do this, and you have to do this. So it's like there's sort of a missing point. So if we could actually use this, some sort of tool to target a neighborhood or a section of town and say, what's your experience on this corridor, on this road? The school's here. Do you have a problem? How do your kids get to school? So those sorts of things before going through a complicated public outreach process related to a specific project, we just sort of get a sense, how are people perceiving this piece of the transportation network? And then we get that feel back, and it probably would be particularly helpful in areas where we don't have a neighborhood association that's actively advocating for something. I'm sure there's a lot of areas that people have concerns, and they're like, you don't have to always go out there and say, well, I'm going to watch and see whether the kids are riding to school in the bike lanes or on the sidewalks, or whether the parents are all driving them, or whatever it is, so that we can use the tools we have, those sort of to reach people and get a sense, what's your feel on this corridor? To the extent that it applies to those kinds of things, I think would be really helpful and much more cost effective on the front end to say, oh, these are the things that seem to be surfacing. This is the public's reaction.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, yes, as this last week, as staff and I sat down and talked through what you saw earlier on the integrated 5-year work plan, this complements our vision of this enhanced frequent interaction on scoping. You have the other tool, of course, is the formal survey, which we really recommend we do need to do. But this again complements that. Here's what the public's thinking. This gives you, I suppose it may give you, added insights as you were saying early, to complement that enhanced, integrated, frequent interaction with commissioners on scoping. So we think that, it's like a three-legged stool, and such. And so if you all are okay with that, we'll start the brain scoping on this. We'll have some recommendations to you shortly, for maybe initial go as a pilot project, and we'll see where it all goes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I think that's a great idea, and the beauty of the social media network is you can target
Yeah.
your area. So you don't just have one
Right.
question out there every week for everybody to answer, but you can really be specific and get some good data.
And, Mr. President, I do want to, again, because I can feel the spears coming into my back from the communications team right now. Again, the recommendation was maybe a question of the week, maybe a question of the month, maybe a question every 2, and such. So I just want to make sure you knew that. Commissioners, as we promised, we have met with consulting engineers and designers that I shared with you earlier that we were going to do. And as you recall, this was an outcome of our recent meeting with the commercial developers as they shared their concerns on the backlog of ACHD reviews. As discussed, the key factor was incomplete, wrong, or lacking traffic impact studies. As Commissioner Hanson knows, as he also attended the commercial developers meeting, 50 to 75% of the traffic studies submitted to ACHD for review do not meet standards, and this causes the delays and such. And as I've shared with our team,
We have someone trying to get in.
can you? I may have locked that door based on the thing we talked about earlier, and I just forgot to, okay. As I've shared with our team are not there to correct homework. And so what you have in front of you are the talking points for the meetings that we had. I will relay to you that the meetings were well attended and such, but probably did not guarantee as much discussion as we had hoped. The traffic engineers appeared more engaged and stuff to improve things for everybody. Civil engineers were quieter, and as we said, we're going to closely watch how this increases our ability to help both the outside and inside folks make this better. So again, in front of you have those notes. Commissioners, we will be finalizing the Amity Eagle ribbon cutting ceremony for 6 October. It's at 9 o'clock in the morning. Invitations will go out shortly to Meridian's leadership, the contractor, Albertsons, and the public, as well as multiple media outlets. We'll keep you posted on the specifics as we go forward. And Mr. President, we'll have proposed talking points for you for that. Then also on the 6th, you will be presenting the formal charity check to the Wyakin Warriors, Wyakin Foundation, and such as we go forward. So Commissioners, that is my admin report for today. I stand for any questions you might have.
A quick request, if we could have an update, or if just email would be probably appropriate on the gas line issue on Philippi. I saw one of the responses to the TELUS is that we discovered that the gas line wasn't nearly as deep as we thought it was. And so I know this is a very sensitive, and we have had to jump through a lot of hoops, but the TELUS sort of sparked me of, I haven't heard a report on the work on Philippi and the planning and what the time frame is on that.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson will work that. And again, for you, as you probably all know, in many parts of Ada County, what may be shown on an old chart is not reflective of truth at all. You really don't know what's happening under the ground until you open the ground. And unfortunately, sometimes that's a gas line, oil line, sewer system, and such, but we'll make sure you know that.
What's the date of our first budget adjustment, first quarter budget adjustment?
Usually the first week of January or something.
So
Submissions due by mid-January. Consider it a formal submission to include, if we could, the small maintenance equipment for the multi-use pathway. I know we've talked about it. It wasn't included in this year's budget. Whether that's a possibility as we go into the new year.
Is this
I
for snow
see.
removal?
No, it's just maintenance, just sweeping and cleaning and.
Yeah, well, trust me, there was five of us that were gonna make or at least 4.
Yeah, I figured we all saw it. We went, looked at it, but I didn't realize it wasn't in the budget.
Mr. President, Commissioners, again, not wanting to always be the bearer of, okay, but at the same token, maintenance still has to provide an operational strategy. I think it would be inappropriate to purchase a piece of equipment if we don't know how to use it, we can't use it, or at the end of the day, it becomes usable for 1.5 miles and that's it. Now, I'm confident we'll be able to get through that, but that has not occurred yet. We'll have that discussion, but again, we have to be satisfied as a staff that we're able to successfully execute it to the best use to give the taxpayer the biggest return on investment, as opposed to maybe making it a static display. I don't think that's going to happen, but I haven't seen the homework yet, so that's the only caveat.
And we need to make that a priority.
No, understand.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I've got, some thoughts. Stacy, did you happen to buy, is she there? Oh, there you are. Did you happen to buy refundable tickets for, myself going to North
Yes.
Idaho? Perfect. So, I just want to communicate publicly, that I'd like to cancel my reservation to the Highway District Association Conference due to the COVID-19 numbers and the crisis standards of care that our entire state has gone into. With that being said, I'm deeply committed to continuing conversations with the board members and leadership, but not at the expense of our health and safety and putting more burden on the already stretched to thin breaking point healthcare system. Director, I should have brought this up last week, but prior to the golf tournament, you assured me that COVID protocols would be in place. I saw none. In fact, me and my husband and maybe one other staff member occasionally were the only ones wearing masks. So my question to you is, why is it that our staff weren't held to the same standard at that golf tournament as they are here today?
Commissioner Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, an interesting question. Again, we maintain the standards that the golf, that Spurwing had put through. We had made the request to have food outside. That was not supported. As you saw in every golf cart, there was hand sanitizer and masks. We did suggest that the participants wear them. That was their choice. They had not to.
I did not hear that.
That was done. I apologize that you didn't hear it. The tournament was held outside and such. Now, the concern, of course, was inside.
Yes.
And such, and I don't have a good answer for that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think it's unfortunate that that Spurwing didn't want to adhere to actual basic COVID protocols. Seeing the amount of people that were inside, unmasked, eating lunch was absolutely devastating for somebody that's working in and out of COVID all the time. And as a state, we have never been in this position before. And for those of any of you that think this is just about COVID, I want you to think again. If you or your loved one has a heart attack, a stroke, or God forbid someone gets in an accident on our roadway, which as the trend continues, their care will be impacted due to the lack of resources and staff. That means not actually being admitted to the hospital, getting treated on a stretcher, or delaying care altogether. This could be me, this could be you, this could be a family member or a friend. This is no longer about strangers, and at this rate, no person in our state will be left unaffected. This impacts our wonderful ACHD team in getting the care they need in case they get into an accident or get hurt on or off the job, as well as all users on our transit system. Our healthcare system is at a breaking point, and I just want to publicly state that I will not stand by and contribute to this problem, nor should ACHD if we elect to do any more events. And I applaud you for going to Zoom for a lot of our all-staff meetings and moving it forward, but I was gravely disappointed by the golf tournament. Thank you.
All right.
Amen,
Then
Commissioner Pickering.
Then if there's anything else, we'll thank you for the report.
Thank you.
And we'll go ahead and begin our commission meeting by having the Pledge of Allegiance, which we would enjoy your participation in.
Pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll begin today's commission meeting by asking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. We'll go on to the consent agenda. And items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless noted. Now, before I ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda, I will let you know that item number 6 from the consent agenda has been requested to be moved to the regular agenda. It will be item number 3 on the regular agenda. And with that change being made, do we have a motion to accept or approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, then we'll go into our regular agenda. And item number 1 on the regular agenda is the Surprise Way presentation from staff. And Justin's going to give that. It is an action item.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Justin Lucas. I am the Deputy Director of Planning and Project Management here at the Ada County Highway District. My presentation is loaded up. There we go. Thank you, Ken. This presentation tonight relates to our 2021 federal aid capital maintenance phase 1 project. This project is under construction right now. We're specifically talking about one of the segments within this maintenance project. It's a group of segments. We are here to talk specifically about Surprise Way, which is one of the segments in the federal aid project. Just to highlight, federal aid projects have special requirements and agreements. You see these all the time on your agenda, but they're not. When we decide to use federal money, it comes with strings attached and special approvals through the Idaho Transportation Department, FHWA. So just more complicated throughout all of the project phases. So just wanted to provide a little bit of kind of project purpose and history. This was identified as a need for pavement maintenance and ADA upgrades back in 2017 by our pavement management group. In 2018, it was included as part of our 2021 federal aid capital maintenance phase 1 project, one of 6 segments. We executed the design contract to finalize all the design work on this segment in July 24th, 2019. Earlier this year, there were some communications with Commissioner Hansen related to this project specifically. A Surprise Way did come up and he had some questions about some other segments. At that time, we communicated the unique nature of this project, the kind of history behind it, the decisions, and it was clearly identified as a legacy maintenance project. And the reason I use that term, it's kind of a new term here at ACH. The commission changed kind of direction to staff 6 to 8 months ago. Maybe it's more than that. I can't remember exactly right now, but there was a significant change to staff about what is included in these types of projects. Going forward, we're including upgrades to the pedestrian area, specific upgrades to driveways that are not ADA compliant that we historically did not do, looking at pedestrian crossings, bulb outs, and other enhancements that would be included in these types of maintenance projects. Obviously, this project was designed and developed without that direction. It was under our old legacy standards, which was very focused on the pavement maintenance aspect and the ADA required ADA upgrades on the corridor. So just wanted to make that very clear. This was discussed at the time it went forward. The construction SLA was approved by the commission February 16. The bid award was provided to the commission. I say provided because ITD actually awards the bid. We just provide you an informational memo stating that the bid was awarded. And that happened on June 16, 2021. As part of the staff report specifically for the construction SLA, staff did highlight the fact that this was a legacy project. We also highlighted, and this needs to be very crystal clear, we can do more on this segment at some point in the future. Doing this work does not preclude our ability to do further work on Surprise Way or any segment in the future. It's just a matter of timing, how the projects were developed, funded, and how they move forward. So jumping specifically into Surprise Way, this is a vicinity map outlining the area. Surprise Way's a little over 2 miles long out there connecting Highway 21 to between Highway 21 and Amity Road. Interesting roadway, a lot of curves in the roadway. It's relatively long, but due to the design, there's lots of curves, quite a few intersections in this area. Wanted to show some kind of contextual pictures. It's a nice street. It has raised medians at a few locations. It has several kind of trees. It has a canopy. It has kind of a unique pedestrian setup where there's a pathway on one side, and then there are bike lanes also on the street. It's as I say, it was developed mid-90s as part of a development out in Southeast Boise. So further context, just to provide the whole picture, it is a residential collector street. The cross section, 2 travel lanes. There is no center turn lane on any portion of Surprise Way. It does have bike lanes, various vertical elements, including street trees, and the medians as I discussed. There are a lot of curves on this roadway, and it curves going into and out of multiple intersections. And there's that multi-use pathway on the east side. The posted speed limit is 30 miles per hour. We did run a brief level of traffic stress analysis on this street. It's relatively a low-stress street as it is today. I mean, with the pathway, the speed, and the existence of all those different things. You have an LTS for bicyclists of 1 if they're on the pathway. It would be a little higher if they're on the street. Pedestrians, it's LTS 2. The only reason is because there's only a facility on one side and not the other, which changes the LTS a little bit. And then vehicular LOS better than C, which for us is really good. It's a very low volume street, really. The 24-hour count in 2020 was 1,742 vehicles. For a residential collector, that's not a lot of volume. That's relatively low. We have local streets designated that have higher volume traffic than that. Maybe the count's a little depressed in 2020, but even if you added, 5 or 10%, it's still relatively a low volume street. So just jumping in specifically to why we're here today, and to discuss some of the existing features on this street that are going to be modified as part of our project. One of the features the street has today there are various locations, 21 to be exact, where there are existing brick paver crosswalks that were constructed when this street was built by a developer back in the mid-90s. There's also one large brick paver roadway section. This is not a crosswalk. It's actually a full section of the roadway that has brick pavers for the entire section of the roadway.
Justin, can I
Sure.
just ask, aren't they concrete pavers, not brick?
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, yeah, it's like they may be made of concrete.
Yeah,
I'd say brick paver there. I'll show some pictures. It's a semantics issue, but yeah, likely the material is concrete brick,
yeah.
concrete brick paver. Sorry about that if I don't have that correct. Just want to highlight. So the original project design that was approved by ITD and that we were moving forward with as part of this project removed all of the pavers and installed ADA compliant crosswalks at the appropriate locations. The reason that the project team at that time, this is years ago, made the decision to remove the pavers, quite simply is they're not, at the crosswalk locations, the pavers are not ADA compliant. So they don't qualify as an ADA compliant crosswalk, so they had to be removed. The other reason that the ACHD was proposing to remove all the pavers was the fact that pavers over time, there can be maintenance issues under ACHD's current standards, which we have different standards than we did in 1995. Pavers like this wouldn't typically be installed in a roadway unless they were under license agreement with the homeowners association, and there is no current license agreement on these pavers.
Mr. President, Justin, I just have one question. So I hear you on the ADA standards, but I've seen brick pavers installed in a variety of cities that look completely ADA compliant. So is there something about these particular pavers or how it was built that makes it not ADA compliant? Because it seems like it works in other places.
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, yes, it is possible to install some sort of paver in a crosswalk and make it ADA compliant. These specific pavers, based on our visual inspection, are not ADA compliant due to the current condition of the pavers. And I don't know if they ever were ADA compliant, to be honest with you. I can only tell you what is there existing today. So yes, it's possible. It's not something ACHD encourages. Pavers have a tendency, I don't know how many of you are familiar with them, they can shift and move and get depressed and they can create tripping hazards. It's a different surface than asphalt or concrete, which is much more stable and predictable over a long period of time. To highlight some of the other issues with the pavers, just to be clear, tripping hazards and obstacles, I mentioned that. The uneven surface, specifically related to pavers, can cause uncomfortable vibrations for wheelchair users and long-term maintenance issues. I do want to highlight also that several of the crosswalks, the paver crosswalks in this subdivision within this roadway, they don't connect to anything on one side, so they're basically a crosswalk to nowhere. So it takes you across the street, and there's not a receiving compliant facility. And I have a couple pictures there. Also, one of our concerns related to the pavers is they are susceptible to damage during construction. So there will be heavy vehicles out in this area going over these pavers when we are actually, doing our work on the roadway. So they are susceptible to further damage during construction. We did receive, this is why we're here primarily today, during all this discussion, we received a letter and some tell-us and various phone calls and emails from the Homeowners Association, few members and the president, asking us to maintain all of the pavers within the roadway, claiming aesthetic and traffic calming benefits. So that's why we're here today. This has been requested to bring forward to you for your consideration. So here's some pictures, and hopefully this gives you some ideas. The existing issues related to the pavers have to do with specific ADA requirements related to vertical protrusions and horizontal gaps. So within the ADA, you cannot have a vertical protrusion. I'm gonna get this wrong here. I believe it's a 1/4 inch is what is, so it's extremely specific. And so where these pavers meet the concrete ribbon area, the gutter, that area where they meet is well over a 1/4 inch. So that specific element is not ADA compliant. There are also, throughout the paver areas, there are gaps between the pavers that exceed a 1/2 inch, which is a very specific ADA requirement when it comes to users for tripping hazards, wheelchair users, etc. So we did a very detailed look at these pavers, and I just wanted to put this up here. I don't have to necessarily read it all, but our ACHD accessibility compliance supervisor went out and did a visual inspection of the crosswalks and found various issues related to compliance for this 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch requirement. So ultimately, non-compliant facilities like this, ACHD, we can't leave these in the roadway. They have to be mitigated, upgraded, removed, changed to make them compliant, and that's by law based on ADA standards. So just a few pictures here. This is an example, oh, I went too far. So here's just a visual, kind of looking at these pavers within the roadway. You can see this specific crosswalk is connected to the pathway, not in an ADA compliant way today under current standards, but there is a connection to the pathway through the gutter there and up onto the pathway on one side. And on the other side, there's nothing. So this crosswalk is not ADA compliant for not only because of the condition of the pavers, but also because it leads you to a condition that is not, there's no facility for you to travel on. Here's a unique example which exists in this neighborhood where the pavers actually lead to, it's not an ADA compliant facility on the other side. It happens to be a trail connection that goes up and connects into the Oregon trail system. So this is one of the areas specifically the neighborhood brought up and that they were concerned about. And so we've been talking to them about that, and I'll go into some of the resolutions and compromises that we have discussed. So as I stated, ACHD listened very carefully to the neighborhood. We've had various communications back and forth. I included those in your packet, not only the letter from the HOA, but communication from staff through Tell Us and other letters back to the HOA and citizens. And what we landed on was really a compromise solution. ACHD staff, based on communication with the neighborhood, did agree that a redesign of the project was possible. It's really a minor redesign, not a major change. We realized that based on our review, it's possible to retain that large brick paver area. It happens to be near the church driveway, and I have a picture of this, but it's not a crosswalk. It's just a part of the roadway cross-section, so it's just part of the vehicular travel way. And we can certainly leave that in place without any ADA compliance issues, and so we agreed to do that with the neighborhood. We also agreed to retain 5 of the concrete brick paver trail access points where the ADA needs are not as clear and specific because the trails are not ADA compliant. The way we would design this is there would be the availability to cross at these locations using these brick pavers, but it would not be a formal crosswalk. It's more of a trail extension. And so depending on how you identify it and how we sign it, we can remove the issues with the
Justin,
ADA. Yes, sir.
These portions of the compromise solution will meet with the ITD and federal specs?
Yes, Commissioner Goldthorpe, that would be part of the process, would is get all this signed off with ITD and FHWA. We believe we can achieve that through a design change and a change order to the construction. We did want to state very clearly, part of this compromise is contingent upon the HOA entering into a license agreement to basically take over the maintenance responsibility for these areas. This would be consistent with ACHD policy with other HOAs that want to put special decorative or aesthetic features within the roadway.
So just to clarify, the license agreement would only cover where the brick pavers would remain?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
President, I have a question. So this is a very old subdivision, correct? The neighbors have been there, about 30?
25 years. Yeah, 25 years, mid-90s is when it was developed.
Okay, and so when they were put in, did the developer pay to put them in?
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioner May, it's our understanding when this was installed, it was all paid for by the developer. But to be clear, the homeowners association does not own these pavers. They don't own any portion of the right-of-way. This is all owned by ACHD, and it's our maintenance responsibility and our responsibility for compliance. So the HOA obviously has an interest in the aesthetic quality of the roadway and these pavers, and they've voiced that interest very clearly, but they don't have any ownership of this. And ultimately, it's an ACHD decision on
established through that license.
The license agreement. It would establish their responsibility to maintain these in perpetuity. Yes.
Justin, I'm just wondering, Commissioner Hanson, is this the same neighborhood that was talked about a lot at the ADA meeting? Am I mixing up subdivisions out that way? We had, Mike was a gentleman that testified.
No, that was actually right nearby. That was
Okay.
Columbia Village.
Okay, I was wondering if that was connected to okay, thank you.
Columbia Village.
So the other thing is part of this compromise solution, because obviously, one of the things you'll see in the documentation and the letters is one of the concerns associated with the pavers has to do with speed mitigation. These, to be clear, these pavers don't qualify as a speed mitigation device under ACHD policy or engineering standards. It's a brick paver crosswalk. It's not like a speed bump or something like that. Certainly, it provides a tactile response for a driver, but the efficacy of that as a speed mitigation device is certainly not clear. Certainly wouldn't be something that ACHD would recommend in this specific scenario as a speed mitigation device. But the neighborhood has raised that, and there has also been previous speed investigations done on this corridor. And you saw John Wasson in the packet provided a lengthy response to a tell-us related to that. So because of this concern, ACHD staff also committed to a future speed study on this corridor after the project is complete, including the installation of dynamic feedback trailers, which are those trailers that provide the clear feedback of how fast drivers are going. And would also include some level of outreach. Whether that outreach was managed by the HOA or ACHD is not determined, but to kind of determine neighborhood support for some type of speed mitigation. Oftentimes it's kind of an assumption that, everyone wants it. That's not the case. That hasn't been our experience as a highway district. There are factions of the neighborhood that may. There are other people in the neighborhood that may not want it for whatever reason. But we have found that before including those types of elements within a corridor, it's a very good idea to make sure we have some level of support. And any of those types of improvements would not be precluded by the project that's currently under construction. They could be looked at as a separate project in the future if they qualified and if that was the desire to do that. So I wanted to highlight as clearly as I can what's going on with all the different crossings out on this Surprise Way. I put green on the far, down near Amity Road. For me, it's on the left side. That's actually a new crossing. There's a new park in that area, and so that crossing is not a paver crossing. It doesn't even exist today, but it's being installed with our project. So we're actually adding a crossing that was in the original design to connect the pathway across the street to some new facilities there. And then you can see the green. This is where the pavers will be removed and ADA compliant crosswalks will be installed, which meet all of ACHD's current standards. The yellow are those trail crossings where the pavers can be preserved through this license agreement compromise solution. And then the red are where the crosswalk pavers will be removed, because those are those areas where there's no receiving facility on the other side, and staff has significant concerns about ADA accessibility and a crosswalk to nowhere. So this kind of summarizes all of the various crossings along this corridor. After the project is complete, I think there's ample opportunities to cross the street safely for all users. And I don't believe our project in any way is decreasing those opportunities. I believe and can say, based on engineering standards, it will be a safer corridor after it's done, especially for users with disabilities. No doubt about that. So in summary, we are required to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's not really an optional or a commission directive. That's something that we are required to do as an agency. The project design is based on engineering best practices for safety and ADA compliance. We believe we've done our best to coordinate with the HOA and developed a compromise solution that we can execute within the construction window that we have right now without basically losing our ability to do this project. And I believe that we are doing our best to respond to neighborhood concerns. I don't know if we can ever 100% meet all of their desires, but we did our best and communicated with them as much as we could on that. With that said, staff's recommendation at this time is to construct the project based on the compromise design that is contingent upon the HOA entering into a license agreement. And then we will, as stated, follow up with a speed study and analysis to look at speed mitigation after the project is complete. And any action there would be a separate project at a future date to determine that. The corridor is going to be a little different. I think the speed study that we completed before isn't necessarily going to turn out the same as the speed study we create after. There's going to be some changes to this corridor with our project, and we need to do another analysis to see how that plays out. So with that stated, I'm glad to stand for any further questions or comments.
Mr. President,
yes.
Justin, where was the church? The papers in front of the church?
Yeah, let me go to, oh, there you go. So this is the large brick paver area. I think the church on the screen would be.
So this would stay?
This would stay.
Okay.
So this would stay, and let me show you, obviously the medians would stay. These paver crosswalks would actually, this is not ADA compliant, so those would be upgraded to a compliant crosswalk. And let's see if I have just a few other, oh, this gives you a good feeling for that large brick paver area that would stay as part of the project.
That's significant.
Yeah, it is. And so just, that's kind of an overview of the corridor.
And are you actively engaged now with them on these compromise solutions, or that's to come?
Yeah, it was our understanding that they had the license agreement issue potentially before their board. I believe it was on Monday or the week before, but they chose to delay that determination until they knew we were having this discussion. So they haven't acted on that license agreement, but we know that they have that opportunity to do so.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Justin, thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering, I understand the sequence of events and removing the crosswalks that we need to, and then doing a speed study, but I'm wondering if it's behooves us in the whole going in once type of conversation and doing bulb outs as part of those crosswalk design features. So is that part of the conversation or no? And why not?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, so that type of change would exceed what we're able to do inside of this active construction project.
Okay.
That's a significant design change. And specifically on this corridor, because there's bike lanes and no parking, bulb outs aren't necessarily a desired treatment, because when you bulb out into Surprise Way specifically to shorten that pedestrian crossing distance, you're effectively obstructing the bike lane and forcing the cyclist into the travel way. And so our bulb out criteria wouldn't recommend bulb outs along this corridor for that reason. And it's not, this is there's no center turn lane. This is not a long crossing for a pedestrian by any stretch of the imagination. And due to the volume, there's hours during the day when you could cross this street and you're not going to see a car because it's relatively low volume. So I think, although bulb outs can work in some situations, they wouldn't necessarily be recommended at this location.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Justin, just a couple of questions. Can you just briefly kind of summarize the scope of this project? Because we're talking about what's in, what's out, but what is the overall scope of this project?
So the original scope and the design, Mr. President, Commissioner, is to rehabilitate the pavement. That's the primary purpose of the project. So I believe on this, it's a mill and an inlay on this specific segment. So they'll mill off a certain portion of the pavement and come back and then pave over back to grade the appropriate amount of asphalt. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, but that is the treatment for the pavement. Also, all of the pedestrian ramps. So let me, if I can I can even show you these. Everything you're seeing where the pathway meets the roadway, all of this is not compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So everywhere along the corridor where that pathway intersects the street, whether it's crossing Surprise Way or a side street, all of those pedestrian ramps are going to be completely replaced, and we're going to have truncated domes, concrete. It's going to look like a completed pedestrian ramp under current standards. So I probably have some more examples of that. The bollard area where that pathway goes into the roadway, that's not ADA compliant. All of that will have to be, so these corners all along the roadway where the streets intersect Surprise Way, the corners are going to be rebuilt as part of this project.
Okay. And, the only, as we were discussing these crosswalks, the thought occurred to me, I know there are, or at least I believe there are many locations throughout the city of Boise and other places where they have crossings that I believe are ADA compliant and they use patterned concrete, something like that. Is that an option? I know that's more expensive. Is that a potential option for this? Is it the kind of thing that potentially the HOA, if they wanted to pony up extra dollars for that, could be, that sort of thing could be put in instead of the brick pavers? Are those options?
Mr. President, Commissioner, I would say it may be an option. It would require some redesign of the project. It's not a typical ACHD treatment. And I think one of the concerns we have at the staff level for these maintenance projects is if we are going to use that type of treatment in one area, then we should be willing to do that in another area. And then if we're making that commitment across the county, I think you could, if you add that up, it could be a substantial cost
Right.
to the highway district. So that's why we wouldn't do that. We have removed many brick pavers all across the county through our maintenance projects. This is not the first time we've done this. We believe that if in this scenario, yes, some type of a license agreement with the homeowners association would be the appropriate avenue to achieve something greater than our standard typical design.
Okay, thanks.
Justin, has it been your experience that if some kind of a exception is made to provide a treatment such as what Commissioner McKinney just asked about, that all of a sudden all the developers and contractors in the valley know what we did and make it a big deal, or is that just kind of a bit of a fear?
Mr. President, I don't know if I can answer that question. I mean, it's, as I say, I can speak to ACHD's typical practice. I can't necessarily speak to how people respond to what we do. I would say that it is typically, our preference to use a standard signage and striping on especially for ADA crosswalks and things like that, because it's the most predictable for the user. They see, they're used to these and what they're used to out in their travels. And from a maintenance perspective, it's certainly the most efficient for ACHD to maintain.
Any other questions? Now, we're going to go ahead and thank you, Justin, and we do have at least one person from the public that would like to weigh in on this, and Stacy just raised her hand because they're on Zoom, correct?
Yes. Mr. Tom Witcher?
Mr. Winter, it's
Witcher.
yours. If you would introduce yourself, your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
He's the neighborhood
Okay,
president.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, my name is Tom Witcher. I'm the president of the Surprise Valley HOA.
Oh, then you can
I
have
live
more
in-
than 3 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, I was original homeowner. I live at 5504 South Broadwing Way. I have lived here since 1996. I'm also a licensed professional civil engineer. And we have had discussions on the brick crosswalks with ACHD staff. These crosswalks were installed with the original development and accepted by ACHD in 1996. I'm here to ask that the crosswalks not be removed with the repaving project. As was mentioned before, they serve two purposes. One is aesthetic. They're a unique feature that adds aesthetics to the area, to the roadway. The second is they serve as a traffic calming feature, especially for vehicles that are larger and pulling trailers. Boat trailers going across these, it bounces them and they definitely have to slow down. To my knowledge, these pathways have performed better than the pavement. There's been no maintenance needed on the pathways. And there's no apparent need now for repairs. So for me, why take them out? There's, as mentioned before, the numbers are right. There's 22 pathways, one being the large entryway. Of the 21 others, 16 of those will be taken out with this project. So there's a pathway on each side of the intersection, as you saw in those pictures. Both of those would be removed on either side of the intersection. I can understand, and for the crossings that are going to become ADA crossings, I can understand maybe the purpose for taking them out at those intersections. I don't understand for taking the ones out to cross nowhere that don't have pedestrian traffic. There's 6 of those crosswalks that could stay. Those, to me, don't require an ADA design feature. They're not used as crosswalks. They're just aesthetic and a traffic calming feature. Our concern is with traffic and vehicle speeds. Yes, traffic and through traffic is going to get worse without them. Vehicle speeds are going to be higher without them. We already see an increased traffic with the development of Terrace Ranch, and now there's the new Bowler Park as well that will increase traffic. For those like me that drive the speed limit, I'm noticing more tailgating and more speeding problems. That's why the HOA asked for the study a year ago for more traffic calming features, not taking some out. As you can see from the pictures, the Surprise Way cuts through the middle of the Surprise Valley subdivision. And the pools and the pathways are on the north side of the Surprise Way. So all the pedestrians that want to access those pathways and pools have to cross from the south to the north to access. The worst intersection is Lichen. It's a very dangerous. There's been near accidents there. Currently, there's a flag set out for crossing for pedestrians to cross with. That is one of our worst intersections. So in summary, we'd like the commission to consider leaving these crosswalks, at least the ones that have no ADA requirement. For a license agreement for those to stay, I guess I disagree with needing a license agreement for something that's been accepted by ACHD for the last 25 years. I can see if the subdivision wanted to install something new, license agreement would be required, but these are existing. These were accepted 25 years ago. Seems like the change in responsibility is unwarranted. My knowledge, the roadway's been chip sealed once in the past and seal coated in the past. It's handled the traffic, construction traffic then. They will have to be protected when the construction takes place. And I certainly mentioned that to the project manager. So that's my summary. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer.
I don't myself. I have a question for Justin. And Justin, which of the paver facilities can be left and still accommodate the ADA?
Mr. President, so as part of that compromise solution, we are maintaining the large brick paver area, which we believe can be left with accommodating the ADA. And then those trail crossing locations, which we believe can be left to accommodate the ADA. So
But the pavers to nowhere,
yeah, the pavers to nowhere, our analysis of that situation is it's confusing to a pedestrian who may believe there's a crosswalk, especially someone who's sight impaired, who gets a visual indication of some type that there's a crosswalk in the roadway, and then it actually doesn't connect to anything on the other side. So in those scenarios, we believe it's most appropriate to remove those, and they don't comply with, ACHD current policies.
okay. Well, the reason I asked that was because of the plethora of telecommunications that we get. If someone in the public thinks even for a minute that we've slightly screwed up on not very strictly adhering to ADA requirements. So that's why I asked. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I just had a question.
Yes.
The 6 crosswalks that are not used as crosswalks, are they part of the 3 that you're retaining, the pavers? He brought up 6 sidewalks that are, or crosswalks that are not utilized for that purpose.
So, Mr. President, Commissioner May, at some of the locations, and I think this is what he's referencing, I'll do my best, we are actually, where there may exist at an intersection, crosswalks on both sides. If I have my presentation, I might be able to show this. But where there's a public street intersection with Surprise Way, currently there's 2 crosswalks for that T intersection to get over to that pathway. In some of those locations, we're consolidating that crosswalk area to just one side. And the reason for that is, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a very curvy street. And so we believe through best engineering practice that consolidating those crosswalks at those intersections where there's 2 today to go to 1 and have a single pathway connection over to the, it's not a perfect example, but you can see it here, how there's a side street that comes into Surprise Way and there's 2 crosswalks. At some locations, not this one specifically, we're actually going to be taking out both paver areas and only installing a crosswalk on one side of the street, consolidating it essentially. The reason behind that is sight distance issues associated with the curvature of the street. So
that he's referring to, that's not an actual crosswalk?
Well, this picture, we're proposing through our compromise solution that the both of these areas stay as part of the compromise solution. And let's see here if I can, maybe I can, it's not moving for me, Ken. There we go. I probably have a good photo somewhere in here. Oh, here's a good location, the pool location. So there's a side street coming into Surprise Way, and today there's 2 crosswalks at this location. And as part of our project, there would just be 1 crosswalk. And what we're doing as part of our analysis, it would be located, I believe, on it's the north side, I think, in this picture, if that's, or maybe it's the south. I'm maybe twisted around here. But the far side crossing in the picture, and the near side crossing would be removed due to the curve coming into this area. So there's curvature that encourages us to only have a single crosswalk at those locations. And I believe what he would like is that we would do that new crosswalk and we would leave the brick paver crosswalk in place. But once again, I think it creates a confusing situation. Staff believes that it creates a confusing situation for the pedestrians, especially those with disabilities, kind of implying that there's 2 crosswalks there when there's really not. There's really only the one, there's the one ADA compliant crossing.
Thank you.
So that's kind of explains our determination.
Good example.
Are there any other questions for?
Yes, Mr. President.
Yes.
If I may, Justin, Mr. Witcher, he used the phrase a number of times, taking out pathways. Are there any bicycle or pedestrian pathways that are actually being removed, or was he using that phrase in referring to crosswalks?
Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, I believe he was using that phrase referencing the crosswalks. We're not removing any section of the pathway or bike lanes as part of this project.
Okay, thank you.
Stacy, do we have anyone else?
Mr. Chris Danley, I'm not sure if you wanted to testify on this item or just for public communications, if you can let us know that.
Chris, did you want to speak
yes,
to
I would
us
like
now?
to testify on this issue. Yes, now would be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, that's right. No video. Okay. Hi, Commissioners. Chris Danley, 2903 East Gloucester in Boise. Thank you for your time. I'll try to be brief. 1996, imagine when Pete O'Neill first actually applied for this pretty innovative project. A lot has changed since then. I want to start with that. There was no Harris Ranch. There was no development really on Amity, and even much of Boise Avenue wasn't developed. I know that in part because I've lived in this area for 15 years and I actually work in Surprise Valley in a condo, so I know this area like the back of my hand. This is a collector level road, and as a collector, it obviously takes traffic from the development and distributes it. But there's a major factor that has not really been discussed. And in fact, if I read the traffic count date correctly, the traffic count date showed February. This is a cut-through traffic route in summertime because of Highway 21 and all the folks taking their boats, jet skis, and everything else up to the lake and up to Idaho City and everything in between. The biggest concern that the folks in Surprise Valley have, the aesthetics is one piece, but it's the speed management. And these aren't experts, they're folks who are living their life. The experts are the ones who are working on the project and know that while the bricks don't really serve much of aesthetic purpose, the residents believe that, speed purpose, the residents believe that they do. So that's the issue we have to solve here, is how do we make sure that the speed going through Surprise Valley is appropriate for a residential collector, which is exactly what this is. And right now, based on our traffic data, we know that, again, if it's collected in February, we're already behind the 8 ball because that's not when this is an issue. We need to collect that information during the summertime. What we have, in addition to the land use side of things, is we have the Greenbelt. It's not just the trail, it's the Boise Greenbelt system. And it feeds the rest of the Boise Greenbelt system that connects across Amity and eventually makes its way down to the river, of which ACHD has put in significant infrastructure to help usher folks back and forth. In addition to that, we have a brand new park and a crosswalk that, by the way, is not compliant to your own standards and needs to be looked at, by the way. I've seen it a bunch of times. We have an awesome park. We have trail systems through there, as mentioned, the pool, and so on and so forth. So when those things are removed, when crosswalks are removed, when what little value, admittedly, the pavers do provide for speed management are also removed, and we have a massive amount of cut-through, especially in the summertime, we have a problem. And that problem's only going to get worse, because once those things are done and we do a new speed study, what is that 85th percentile going to show? It's going to show that traffic volumes and speeds have probably increased. So then are we going to increase the speed again? This neighborhood is asking for help, and it hasn't been touched really in this 25-year period of time, other than the original slurry seal type thing. But let's get this right. One of the things that I would suggest to maintain that quality of life and the safety that we all want and aspire to, raised crosswalks. Let's get rid of the pavers in the right spot. Mr. Lucas is correct, and staff is correct. They know ADA, they understand the issue. But a raised crosswalk, at least in the specific locations, does a number of things. It elevates profile for people who are crossing, it increases visibility, and it absolutely addresses the speed issue. It's not speed bumps, which I know the fire departments and other emergency service providers might be against, but it absolutely works in a way that's appropriate to most. They don't have to be all over the place, but it's a few key locations where this ADA issue is, and it resolves that as well. So in order for all these things to happen, I really highly encourage the district to pause as much as we can, recognize these factors, and get this right? Let's do the right thing here. The residents in this area, they're not the experts. They're just trying to live in this space and not have the cut-through speeding traffic that we know occurs every single summer. They're just trying to walk to the pool. or just trying to walk to the new park that's a multi-million-dollar investment, and trying to walk, and bike to the Greenbelt system, which again, ACHD has done a phenomenal job of trying to help, improve in addition to the city. So that's my brief testimony. I thank you for your service, and I'll stand for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Chris. I don't have one. Maybe one of the other commissioners does. I have one for Justin.
I have one for Justin as a follow-up.
All right. So Justin, Chris suggested that possibly a raised crosswalk would serve multiple purposes here. I know that's not part of the design right now, but we mentioned at the beginning that we could go back and look and make some changes. Would this or would it not be something that we could integrate initially into this?
Mr. President, members of the commission, so the concept of a raised crosswalk is certainly something that could be included at a future date as part of a separate project. The issue with including it in this specific project is the potential impacts on the existing drainage system and other elements that are out there. Anytime you're going to change the profile of the roadway, it's going to have design-related issues that go outside and connect and all the other things going on out there. And so it would be staff's recommendation that if that was an outcome of the speed study, and I never want to presuppose what's going to be the outcome of a speed study. We need to do the study and then determine how to move forward. I think if a raised crosswalk or something like that was identified as something that the neighborhood was interested in, we could certainly incorporate that into a future effort. That's why we're in this odd space between the legacy project and the design and the federal process and all of the things and permits we've done to get to this point. And then if we were doing this project differently today, starting from scratch, my answer would be very different. I would say, absolutely, we'll look at that as part of the design process. Unfortunately, where we are today is we're at construction. We're not in design. We're the contractor's hired, the design is done, and we're moving forward. And so it would be, from a construction perspective, it would be nice to include it, but what we do with this project as planned certainly does not preclude us from doing something different in the future with another design.
Thank you.
Mr. President, Justin, so you kind of alluded to this, but it doesn't seem very clear to me why, because this, to your point, you just mentioned how this feels like it's out of order with how we normally do things. We just went through it in the work session, right? Yeah. We scope it, we design it, we talk about all the other ideas and things like that, versus this is like, we'll go in and then we'll evaluate some other aspects of it. So can you explain why this project and why now? Because I don't want to make things worse for this neighborhood. And there's other elements of ADA, lack of ADA compliance in so many places in our county. So why this particular section? So, Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, members of the commission, as stated earlier in the presentation, this was selected back in 2016, 2017 because of a pavement maintenance issue and then the existing obvious ADA issues in this area. So the driver back then was this asset management focus that we have to maintain ACHD's assets. And the pavement condition in this area was identified as something that needed to be mitigated and improved. When we do that, we obviously then would upgrade the ADA facilities at the same time. So the question of why this segment now is this was identified as a need to maintain the integrity of the pavement and not see further deterioration. And that's part of so that's what we did then, why we are, and it moved through several steps to get to where we are today. Moving forward, if this were to be identified, let's say this year for something we were going to do in 2025 or 2026, yeah, it would be a different process based on the commission's recent direction. We would have likely done some level of neighborhood outreach during the design phase to unearth some of these issues that we're discussing today. That didn't happen under our old scenario, and it wasn't part of our process then to do that.
because we were, that was our directive at the time. And things change, and certainly we understand that. This project, in some ways, is caught in the middle of that, which happens. But what staff is trying to indicate is, we're not done. We're absolutely committed to do the speed study. We're absolutely committed to look at potential future improvements along this corridor in coordination with the neighborhood. But due to the nature of the federal project and the design commitments we have made and the construction commitments we have made historically and up to this point, we believe it's the right thing to do to move forward with the project and take care of some of these other issues at a later date.
Mr. President, thanks, Justin. I really appreciated Justin. He knows I call him when I heard that we had these in 5 or 6 different federal maintenance projects in my side of town. Said, where are they? All of them have speed issues. And I think you said, well, actually, a couple of them are going to move on. And so I did raise the issue of speeding on Surprise Way and the other issues on those federal maintenance projects. The first time I learned about the fact that the pavers would be removed was when the neighborhood found out too, and that's where I heard from the neighborhood association. So the design aspects of taking these features that were already working sort of didn't arise until this summer. So we were pretty far down. And yeah, this is legacy, it's triggered by PCI, the quality. The staff also has evaluated the concrete pavers, and actually they're in great shape because they're concrete. They've withstood 25 years, and they haven't shifted. They serve to a certain extent as modified speed humps. I don't see a reason why we can't do this right. We just finished in our work session, 3 work sessions, looking at real tough things about moving things up in priority. In fact, the priority issues of the neighborhood just above them in the Columbia Village are really important. Whatever we do here, I have no illusions that it'll be left like this for 10, maybe as many as 25 years. It'll be hard to move things up just because of the other moving parts. And, there's an old adage in medicine, do no harm first. And I realize why and how we got here, and evaluating things and not evaluating things with federal capital projects. We look at the condition of the asphalt, which is not great, even though the concrete is. And we couldn't add any kind of speed mitigation issues. And even when the neighborhood asked for them, the response was the standard, ask your neighbors, circulate a petition, you have to pay for them. And their assumption at that point was speed humps or stop signs, and we know that there are a lot of varieties, as Mr. Danley pointed out, of speed mitigation that could operate. And in fact, this is an important neighborhood that is willing to take, they don't have a choice, is willing to take the traffic that's going to continue to go through here. I drive on it probably 3 or 4 times a week. It's rare that I come off of Highway 21 going the speed limit and I'm not tailgated by somebody. And maybe it's somebody in the neighborhood, I don't know. But yeah, it's very tempting because you got to get to the other end. And, it's not as curvature as you want it to be, but it is pretty much a straight shot. I think we can leave the pavers in place. I think if we move forward with this project, since we're already going to do some major changes on the curbs, that we can move those crosswalks to raised crosswalks or ADA accessible crosswalks and leave the pavers in and have them continue to function as a speed mitigation, since we're not putting in other kind of speed mitigation. I think we can leave those pavers in. The pavers serve that function, and I think we need to get this right. I think Mr. Danley's right, with this neighborhood understood this was ACHD, fully acceptable to ACHD for the last 25 years. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to say, oh, you have these things in place. By the way, you now have to pay to maintain them. I don't think there'll be much cost, because they appear to be very well designed, being concrete. But I think we have to do this right, and I can't support us moving forward with this. And I realize we're caught between what we're gonna do in future with federal capital maintenance projects and what we've been doing in the past, and I don't want this neighborhood to pay for it.
President, looks like there might be somebody else that wants to testify, their hand.
I was just gonna ask Stacy.
Yes, the iPhone, I've asked to identify themselves and they have not, but I will ask them to unmute, and please identify yourself with your name and address slowly for the record. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. My name is Robert Farmer. I live at 5393 South Broadway Way. And I'm a licensed civil engineer in Idaho for over 40 years. Just to give you a background, I was the one that requested the speed study back in February of 2020, and worked with John Watson trying to get all this, see where we were on speed. Coming out of Broadwing, which is my road, is right prior to a major turn, and you pull out, you don't see anybody, and then they're right on your back. I think it's dangerous, and I believe that with taking the crossings out without something to help traffic is going to be dangerous, and I think it could end up with more accidents or someone getting hurt. Justin had said that the road has low volume, but I believe that's true, but low volume invites speeding, especially on a curvy road. People drive it very, very fast. Coming into Surprise Valley, the large section of brick pavers, it wasn't mentioned, but that's right at the start of Surprise Valley. And more importantly, prior to that, when you come off Amity, that's 35-mile-an-hour speed limit, and it changes from 35 to 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. I think it does help remind people, hey, I'm in a different speed limit, it slows down. Now, what the speed study in 2020 did, they found, and reading at my notes here, speeding was found to be an issue with a set speed limit of 30 miles an hour. They found speeders up to 38 miles an hour, with a number of speeders qualifying Surprise to be eligible for traffic calming. So it's eligible for traffic calming, but the slight traffic calming that we have with the brick paver, you're going to remove that and then study it, and we're going to be vulnerable to having issues, accidents. The school bus picks kids up at every corner, and the kids are right on the street, and people are speeding. I'm worried, and I would request that ACHD look at additional traffic calming facilities that can be put in, and not in 5 years, not in 2 years, but immediately after you finish this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stacy, is there anyone else?
I do not have any.
Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to address this item? That being the case, we'll close this item, and because it is an action item and we're being asked to render an opinion and decision on whether or not staff should go ahead with the construction as they are, or some other thing, I'd put it before the commission right now for a motion and discussion.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Let me just, I have to say I disagree with Commissioner Hanson on this, as far as whether we should go forward or not, because, well, okay, first of all, the comment made by some of the members of the public who've commented saying, let's just leave the pavers in, and if, maybe I'm mistaken, but I think Commissioner Hansen said something like that as well. I may be wrong. In any case, the reality is, if the determination is made that these things don't meet ADA, we legally can't build something that doesn't comply with ADA standards. We have no choice. That's our obligation. And it's unfortunate that a lot of these additional issues weren't addressed in the original planning of this project. Be that as it may, that's water under the bridge. We can't change that now. What we can do is say, I think essentially what staff is recommending right now is, I think, the best compromise. It's you know, this isn't a perfect situation, but to derail a project that's at this point, I think is a mistake. When you've got a project that's ready to go forward, the ripple effects of derailing it and slowing it down and trying to redo from the beginning, the benefits outweigh the costs. And for that reason, I think we ought to agree with staff's recommendation on this. I think it's a good compromise. It allows many of the pavers to remain in place, and it provides for now addressing the speed and the other issues. And the comment that the pavers help with speed mitigation, I understand that pavers add a little bit of resistance as you drive over, but I don't know that it is a serious speed mitigation issue. So absolutely, the speed study should be done, and additional steps, if they're needed, ought to be, planned to be taken. But we're in a situation here where decisions of the past are here in front of us. We can't build something that's not ADA compliant, and we've got something that's ready to go, and it's not a perfect situation, but I think the path proposed by the staff is a good one.
May I ask a question of Justin? I really appreciate the spirit of compromise that you are engaging in and moving forward with that. I think it's clear that some type of traffic calming is necessary because you do have that cut through traffic and it's only going to get worse. So what would it take? And I really like the idea of the raised crosswalks. So timing wise, to go forward with this project, how do we then get to the point where we can do something on the traffic calming, say perhaps after the traffic study with the raised sidewalks? What kind of timing? Is there a way that we can move that up sooner?
Mr. President, members of the commission, so obviously there's going to be a construction phase associated with the current compromise design if that's how we choose to move forward. After that, the speed study could occur. I mean, the time of year has been brought up of when is it appropriate to do that speed study. The speed study is not just, as we look at the different intersections, we're doing a different examination of, there's also a cut through traffic potential study that is associated with that to actually determine the amount of cut through traffic or those people not living inside the community using the corridor. So all of that can happen. But it would be after this project is complete. So most likely the earliest we would do that would be like spring of next year, when we're, because we want to do it after we're done with the construction of this project, which is going to move into the winter time.
Well, I think that would be a critical component of it. If we move forward with this project, if we could get a commitment that we could be moving forward with the traffic impact study and looking at increased traffic calming, perhaps the raised side crosswalks, rather than just letting it float off into the next 5, 6 years. So, if we could get some sort of, language or compromise or suggestion on moving forward with that, I would be in support of going forward.
Mr. President, I'm building off of that point, but it doesn't seem very clear to me. So this is different funding, so this wouldn't be part of our integrated 5-year work plan, is that correct?
Mr. President, members of the commission, So just to play this out, there's a specific funding source, federal dollars associated with the project in question right now that we are moving forward on. If, as an outcome of this speed investigation and in the future, there was a desire to do something more, it would likely be a local dollar amount that we would use to do that, which is much more flexible. The process of spending those dollars is flexible, but it would be something identified in your budget or the integrated 5-year work plan as a project. If it's something the commission wants to accelerate or enhance based on this conversation, in your motion tonight, you can direct staff to, basically follow the compromise we've said. And if you wanted to attach some sort of language associated with coming back to you when the speed study is complete with options and determinations, you can certainly do that, and we plan to do that. That's what we've made the commitment to do.
So are you saying, Justin, so any additional traffic calming would have to come out of a separate budget, right?
At this point, yes,
Right.
Commissioner.
So in just my opinion, I totally am very passionate about making sure that our system is ADA compliant. We have so much ground to make up from, things that were built before the passage of the act and all of that. But it feels like, just given that we've just gone through and we're going to continue to finalize the 5-year work plan, it just doesn't seem realistic that we're going to be able to get them the relief that they need in a timely manner after ripping up some of these intersections. And it just doesn't seem like a really good use of our time and money and having it be such a weird process. It just doesn't feel right to me, and putting them I think it was Mr. Palmer had said, vulnerable to the speeds that would be happening as a result of this work. And I would never want a project that we did, regardless of us saying that we're going to build something down the line, I would never want to be responsible for something that made things worse for them.
Well, I think certainly having the ADA compliant measures met, I mean, that's critical. But they also, we need to take a sooner rather than later look at the traffic calming. And so if we could have that tied into it, that at the earliest that we're going to get that traffic impact study, and then you're going to come back to us with options, and then you have the compromise with retaining some of the pavers. I think we're trying to put the best that we can put together with the timing. It's the timing on this right now.
I'm just thinking, like, where are we gonna fit that though? That's
Yeah,
my
we're
thing.
already
Like,
starting construction.
Like, I mean, I'm already planning like things that I can't even. We couldn't even put in this 5-year work plan, right? So how are we gonna squeeze?
So what would
it
be
in?
the other option? It would be a shame at this juncture to just not do any of the enhancements and the.
Well, then a motion needs to be crafted that takes care of that.
Right.
Right, but I kind of wanted to find out what the likelihood and really what we could be looking at before we go down that path, so we can get something crafted that's gonna pass.
Yeah, Mr. President, if I may, that last slide, I think, or the second to last slide of Justin's presentation, I think kind of laid out the plan, and it seems to me, well, two thoughts. Number one, with respect to a motion, I would think that we could simply specify a timeline for completion of the speed study, and that it be brought back to us. Another thought to keep in mind, I understand the concern about speeding, but two thoughts. Number one, I don't think that this particular project being completed is by itself going to have a huge effect on the speeding on that street. I think it's the geometric design of the streets that's the primary issue. And so that's not going to be a big change. And understand that this street's been there for like 25 years. So if it takes us a year or two to address that and deal with that, that's another year or so down the line, but it's a situation that hasn't just come up overnight. It's a situation that's been there for quite a long time. So I don't know if, Justin, we could go back to the slide you had that kind of outlined the proposed arrangement on this.
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, we'll bring that up. I did want to add that, if next year, as an outcome of this, the types of improvements we're talking about potentially adding on as some sort of add-on project after the current one is done, could be dealt with through a budget adjustment process. We will come back to you and talk about the options to get those things done. The issue is we have to go look at the design, the drainage implications, where are the drop inlets today, and how is the water going to flow. Anytime you add something like a raised crosswalk, we just have to get into some of those details, which at this point we just don't have in front of you today. But we can bring those back. Certainly we can bring those back and provide you with the costs and all of those things. And then it would be at the commission's discretion on how to move forward through the budgeting process.
So we can do that and slow down or stop the construction that's started right now?
No, Commissioner Goldthorpe, President Goldthorpe, just to be crystal clear, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is we move forward with the project, the compromise design concept, and towards the construction that we have discussed today. And then, as we have more information and develop some secondary project potentially, we would bring that back to the commission for another action, and we could go back and then do another project to enhance the crosswalk or whatever it is that's decided at that point.
Okay, and then I would remind the commission that they have the final say on the timeline for this.
Justin, may I ask, what would be a realistic time frame for us to request to do that speed study and come back with information? Could we tie it to project completion date?
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, as was mentioned today, and just to be fully transparent, the speed study, if indeed based on the testimony today, likely needs to be done kind of in that spring, summer timeframe when there is the opportunity to capture that potential cut-through traffic that may exist in this neighborhood. And I'm not questioning the neighbors, I'm just saying we don't have the ability to provide that information until we actually study it. So if this project moves forward, depending on the timeline of construction, and I'll be totally honest, this may bleed through the winter based on the paving window we're in right now. We're getting towards the end of the year. We actually may not be paving, depending on the contractor and the paving window, until next year to finish off this anyway. So I would say that kind of spring, summer timeframe of next year would be a reasonable time to do the traffic analysis, the speed study. And near the end of summer, we could certainly come back to you with options and considerations for how to move forward at that point.
So would it be perhaps reasonable to set a date of, say, August 31st of 2022?
Sure.
Just what I was thinking.
Sure.
Because
Members
that
of the
gives the
commission.
whole summer to complete
Yep.
any paving and to do the study and so on.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable for us to provide all those further information and details back to you at that time.
I think where we are with the timing and how far along we are with this project, that would be a reasonable and viable option for us to go forward.
So, Mr. President, I have a question for Justin. So our next set of federal capital maintenance projects will be subject to stricter scrutiny. So this legacy holdover, we're basically pushing this into the next year. Why can't we make this a project and go back and design it so we aren't decoupling, taking up the pavers with this hope that we'll have something in a year or two at the shortest, who knows what in terms of our budget. Why can't we use the federal money as part of the design project to push this in with the other projects, capital maintenance projects that are going to be integrated as we've requested that they do? As you know, I was very concerned and opposed the federal capital maintenance project on Oahe for this very reason last year or the year before. It goes by an elementary school. The PCI was bad. The PCI is now great, but the dangers that have existed and probably were accelerated in that neighborhood are a big concern. But that was a legacy, and so and probably one of the things that triggered the change. What would it cost us? If shifting this, taking this, there's components of it that would remain, but we make it so we aren't decoupling what is the biggest concern, and that is the removal of a feature that has provided some semblance of traffic calming, removing that, and then with the promise that maybe we'll put something back in.
Mr. President, Commissioner Hanson, so as stated earlier in the presentation, there's a series of approvals and design reviews and all those things that have happened, years ago that if we re-engage in that process, there's certainly a cost associated with that. There's some question of when it comes to the environmental approvals of our ability to work through that. So the money for construction is at risk if we're not able to execute the project. And so that's what I'm referencing when I talk about all these requirements and approvals that come with the federal dollar. We've actually put this out to bid, right? We have a contractor who's ready to go. So we're at a point in the process where, we put ourselves at jeopardy if for some reason we enter into some sort of redesign phase and we can't come to resolution, or there's some issue that comes up that potentially, makes the project non-viable as a federal project. Then we're stuck and we have to pay back the money we spent on design. We lose the money we had for construction associated with this project. So there's a lot of risk and unknowns associated with that, and that's why that's not staff's recommendation. If this was a locally funded project and we were having this same conversation, I would say there is more flexibility because you have more flexibility at that time. Because it's federally funded, that flexibility just doesn't exist in the same way because we're not the sole decision makers in the process.
So I've seen ITD go back at even more of an 11th and a half hour and redesign things once they've realized the error, and they use federal money. So I don't think there's a great risk in it, as great a risk. I think you're capable, and I think the feds are capable of working with us, understanding the very unique context, and they can just look at the map and see, oh, we totally get the demands that are going to be placed, that are placed on this corridor. And we'll work with you and make it happen because it's going to have to be a permanent solution for the next 25 years.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Yes.
That we approve construction of the Surprise Way project based on the compromise design presented here by staff today, with the condition that the follow-up speed study and analysis of speed mitigation measures and proposal of speed mitigation options be presented to the commission no later than August 31st, 2022.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I am prepared to make a substitute motion unless the maker of the motion might agree to put an additional timeline onto his motion, and that be that should the speed study show a necessary traffic calming, that the design of that traffic calming be presented to the commission no later than the end of the first quarter for budget adjustment of 2023.
I think I'm okay with that.
All right, would you second that?
Absolute second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
The motion carries. We'll now go to item number 2, which is the CUNA Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plans for Adoption. And that would be Edinson Batista. And we have heard from Edinson on this before, so.
Twice now we've seen you.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Edinson Bautista, ACHD Senior Transportation Planner. This evening, I'm presenting to you the final recommendation for the CUNA Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. We spent the past 9 months in the community of CUNA identifying opportunities for enhancements to bike and pedestrian facilities. Staff is confident in the process and the plan produced, and recommends the adoption of the CUNA Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan as written. The CUNA planning area is highlighted in this slide. The light polygon delineates the planning area which follows the city area of impact. During the September 15 Commission work session, staff provided an overview of the tools used to collect public input and overall the results of each of the efforts. In summary, the public outreach process consists in three main components. A school outreach, which surveyed a total of 349 students from the CUNA Middle School. An online comment period, which collected a total of 116 comments. And an online open house, where staff presented the proposed project list and collected a total of 64 comments, with 135 liked projects. Overall, through this neighborhood plan process, we received a total of 529 comments. The plan identifies a number of bicycle and pedestrian improvements, including a low-stress bikeway projects, bicycle facilities along corridors like 10 Mile Road, Lindo Road, Deer Flat Road, sidewalk projects throughout the city of CUNA downtown core and surroundings, and crossing projects at key locations like Avalon Street and K Street, and crossings at major roadways where the low-stress bikeway intersect. In summary, the draft list consists of 144 projects, where 19 are bike projects, 22 sidewalk projects, 20 crossing projects, and 83 major roadway projects. The major roadway projects will include both bicycle and pedestrian improvements. The CUNA Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan is a project identification tool. Projects will be evaluated and programmed as part of the Integrated 5-Year Work Plan and the budget process, in close coordination with the City of CUNA and the CUNA School District. Staff recommendation is to adopt the CUNA Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan as written. This concludes my presentation. I'll stand for any questions.
Edinson, have you changed your report since last week?
No, sir.
Well, I'm still excited for it. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. President, I am too. I really appreciate this, and I've seen this now a couple times. Looking forward to the use of the level of traffic stress being the metrics by which we prioritize those projects. It's our tool. I've seen it used now outside the agency and some inside the agency. The other is that here is an example. CUNA per capita is the fastest growing area. The demand for safety within that core area that you've described as part of the neighborhood plan that we'll be focusing on is the demand for safer bicycle and pedestrian facilities is acute, largely because these developers are helping to fuel traffic going into, so it's the drivers coming from a distance that are contributing to that. And yet the developments on the outside aren't paying for any of this. We got to get this out of the existing property tax base. So another reason why we have to change the law and our ordinance to make sure that these critical needs aren't left over and ended up getting on a long list of community project needs that aren't funded by development. Growth should pay for the impacts of growth, and the impacts of growth are really accelerating the need for the passage of this and the implementation of this bicycle and pedestrian plan, which is excellent. So with that, unless there's another comment, I would move to approve.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
This is
public
a
hearing.
public hearing,
Yeah,
Jim.
to get some
How
input
dare
from
you.
others. Sorry, so enthusiastic, Edinson.
Well,
Excited to see
you
this
know, I
project
just
go
want you
forward.
to know that when we're
Darn
through
good
at the
work.
public testimony, if there is any, I plan on making a
Oh, okay.
motion.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Unless the public can convince me this isn't in their best interest. So, Stacy, do we have,
We do have someone signed up here in person, Mr. Jace Hellman. Come on up, please state your name and address for the record.
and then tell us what you do for a living.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. For the record, Jace Hellman. I'm the CUNA Planning and Zoning Director. Our address is 751 West 4th Street. I won't take up too much of your time. I just want to be here to thank Kittleson and Associates, the staff at ACHD, and the members of the commission for all the hard work on this project. We're super excited. There's a definite need to enhance our pedestrian network in the core of the city. So with that, I just want to say that we 100% support the adoption of this document.
I figured you would. Thank you very much for coming.
I appreciate all the help that we've
I have a
gotten.
question for Jace. So will you help us change our statute and ordinance so we can pay for this sooner rather than later?
I would be more than happy to.
Fantastic.
We'll be talking about that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for
being here.
Is there anyone else who would like to address this item? Seeing none, the matter is properly before the commission for motion and discussion, and I would like to make the motion that we approve the CUNA neighborhood bicycle and pedestrian plans for adoption.
I'll second that then.
Is there any discussion? Then all in favor? Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? I hear wave of cheering.
And I was like, Wava didn't testify. I'm so surprised. Hi, Wava. Thanks for being here.
Okay, we will go on to item number 3, which is item number 6 from the consent agenda, which is the fiscal year 23 roadway and ADA improvements. Part 1, professional services agreement, and it is a request for approval. Justin.
President Goldthorpe, members of the commission, good evening.
Good evening.
You getting a dry mouth?
I know.
Not quite.
Just wait. Hopefully not. Okay, Mr. President, I've got a sequence of questions for you, Justin.
Well, don't you want to hear his presentation?
I didn't know if you were like, oh, I thought I was going to dive right into it. Sorry, I'm just so
Mr.
excited.
President, Commissioners, I have a very brief presentation,
I will be
just to highlight what we're doing tonight.
Apologies.
This actually ties directly into some of the conversations we've been having tonight. So I just want to highlight what we're doing in the process here. So this is to hire a consultant to design very specific segments that were outlined in the scope of work that was attached to the staff report. Those segments are Allenbaugh, Cole, Edgewood, Goldenrod, and Orchard. And I just want to highlight these projects include not only pavement maintenance and ADA compliance, but enhanced pedestrian crossings. There's lots of bulb outs included in these segments as directed by the commission, stormwater pipe replacement, APS signal upgrades, and various other items. So more comprehensive than the legacy approach. With that, staff is recommending approval of the design contract at around 800 and change. And ACHD's portion, going back to the whole thing about federal dollars and why we do this, of that amount, our portion turns out to be about $60,000. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Justin. So I really enjoyed reading this and I'm really excited about it. I just have a lot of like clarifying and curious questions about scope and what's considered and all of those elements. So that's the premise for my question. So specifically, and a lot of these are in my district too, which is also what piqued my interest. So Cole Road and the Mountain View section, it talks about traffic signal and APS modifications. Can you explain exactly what you mean by doing those things at the intersection?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, so at a traffic signal, a corner where there's, a light, there's various different elements of the ADA requirements that we look at. One of the elements is the actual pedestrian ramps, so the concrete surface where the pedestrian enters and exits the roadway. There's the equipment where they can touch the button and get some sort of crossing indication. That's the APS. Okay. The ones that beep at you and have a kind of a tactile response, they beep when you touch them. That is kind of the upgraded, more APS that's talked about here. Some of them talk to you. There's all kinds of elements associated with APS, but ultimately it's making that corner totally compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and even including some enhancements like APS that go above and beyond basic requirements.
And my only concern is, we've talked about, and now it's hopefully, we haven't approved the plan, but we've talked a lot about these intersections and just how troubling they are in terms of speed and all of those elements. And I'm just a little worried that this is like putting the cart before the horse because we haven't assessed that. Or do you think this is going to be all fine and dandy?
Well, Specifically on this segment of Ustick to Mountain View on Cole, I mean, this is an arterial roadway,
Right.
so the opportunity for certain elements, because of it's an arterial roadway, may not be there. But certainly upgrades to the pedestrian network and all those other things and driveways. There's a lot of things going on that older corridor, and there's a lot of improvements being made. I certainly don't think it conflicts with any, especially south of Mountain View. I think what you brought up is the other intersections and things in that area that are north of the project limits on this project.
Okay. And then it's talking about the North Glenwood Street intersection alignment. And I just want to confirm that that's the part of North Glenwood that there's two like dead end North Glenwood pieces, right, that don't connect because of Spalding Ranch. And so I just wasn't quite sure what you meant by the North Glenwood Street alignment, because I'm sure we're not cutting through Spalding Ranch.
Yeah, and let's see here, Seth. I'm gonna answer this and see if I'm right. Let's see if I can get it. I believe the North Glenwood Street alignment as part of this project is the one that is off of Cole, that basically is heading into the Spalding Ranch Park area. It's not the other one around the corner. So it's the one directly adjacent to this segment.
So what would the alignment accomplish exactly?
Wow.
Like why an alignment?
Well, there's that intersection's very interesting right now. It was intended to be a couplet, remember, at one point. So as part of this project, there's going to be some modifications to that, basically shortening the crossing distance and doing a few other things to enhance the pedestrian realm and remove what was going to be an arterial roadway connection and make it more of what it is now, which is kind of just a local street connection.
Love it. That's exciting. So then moving on to Orchard. So there's so Orchard Street on the specific Emerald to Fairview. It says in the report that the Fairview intersection is not going to be included. I just would like to know why.
I believe Orchard and Fairview, once again, let's see if I get this right, is actually listed as a separate project, a standalone project as part of ACHD's ADA compliance efforts. There we go.
Okay, 3 for 3 already. Good job. And then on the Orchard Street, Fairview to Chinden, it talks about, making sure that the driveways are ADA compliant. I think it mentioned that, just kind of, easing through that corridor. But there's not very many driveways. Like there's a couple business access, and then there's a section that gets to the Winstead Park Neighborhood Association, that Central Rim section. Not Central Rim, excuse me. But there's a lot of extra space on, if you're going, I might be mixing up my stuff, but there's lots of space when you're going south on Fairview. It's where Wild Plum is. There's this weird parking lane situation. There's width for bike lanes. There's like a green section. There's a lot going on. And so I was just really curious with this kind of effort to make sure that the ped ramps are good. Obviously, that's a different project all in itself, but I'm just wondering, how does that actually mesh really well with all of these other factors where it's high speeds, it's really wide, it doesn't feel that protected?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, in the scope, it actually, on that segment, calls out the analysis to look at reducing the width of the travel lanes and increasing the width of the bike lanes. So that is considered as part of the scope of work, and some kind of cleanup of some of those undefined areas is part of the scope of work.
And thank you for mentioning that. So yeah, you're right, I did read that. And so I'm wondering then, because with our new policy about arterials and having protected bike lanes or separated bike lanes, are we going to make sure that we put in these small, like concrete little barriers, or what type of elements are we going to put in so we can reflect our policy change?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, so we have not at this point, by policy, decided to include some sort of vertical separation on all bike lanes. We're doing a pilot on Maple Grove, and you'll remember this. We're going to be installing these plastic, hardened lane lines, we called them, through that project. Those don't necessarily, they're not hard to install. They can be installed at any time. We really do want to get a feel for how those work on Maple Grove. There's a lot of things we want to monitor, which is debris buildup behind the, those separators, which has to do with an earlier discussion about the sweeper. the, how often they're being hit by drivers and, some level of kind of user experience. So that's not included here, but it certainly wouldn't preclude some future installment of those with some, separate effort.
Okay. Do you have any sense for when this observation period with Maple Grove will be complete and we'll have the information we need to move forward?
Excellent question, Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering. So Maple Grove is being completed now. So the design and the installation of those hardened lane lines will be one of the last things that's installed as part of that project. So basically, it's all going to get done, and then we're going to install those. I think, we're heading into winter. We'd like to wait until kind of the springtime, summer to get a feel for some user experience and other issues associated with, not just a winter maintenance, but also spring, summer maintenance activities. So I think sometime, by the end of next year, we'll have a good idea of how those are working. And if the commission chooses to implement some sort of broader application of those types of facilities, we would look at it at that time.
Okay, thank you for that. And then just a technical question. What's the difference between a preliminary design review and just a regular design?
Preliminary design is the earliest phase within a project of looking at the basic layout and basic elements. Regular design reviews happen later in the process when more detail has been added into the design.
Okay. And then will all of these design elements that the consultant's going to take into account, are they also going to have our level of stress metrics and understand how to incorporate and design with those things in mind?
So yes, the scope of work, as you read through it, it incorporates a lot of those elements associated with level of stress. We've just had a presentation from ACHD staff to the consulting community. Remember, the commission adopts something and then we actually have to try and explain it to everybody. So we are working on that, and although it may not be specifically listed in this scope of work,
I didn't see it, but
it's something that we are looking and working with our consulting community on as they develop these projects and as we provide this. Remember, we may not always be able to get to an LTS 1 or 2, especially in the built environment. It can be very challenging, but we will be making decisions based on the best possible LTS we can achieve.
That's great. And then another technical design feature question. A lot of these intersections, especially I'm thinking on Orchard, there's a lot of pedestrian activity going east and west, some going north and south. And I was just curious, I haven't heard a lot about the radius of some of these curves and corners. Is adjusting the radius so that traffic is a little bit slower going through these intersections, is that also a potential design component?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, and this is another one I'm going to stretch here, and I'll have to look back and make sure I'm not speaking out of school. But I think specifically at Fairview and Orchard, that intersection, we are adjusting the radius, and that is part of Are you getting a thumbs up there?
Yep,
yeah, look at that. So that's good.
But the ones though that aren't at that particular intersection, are we thinking other ones as well? Where they're
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering. So yes, where it's appropriate and the radius is, extremely large compared to current standards or something like that. Yes, that is something we'll look at, especially if we're already modifying existing curb line. It allows us to potentially modify the radius.
That's great. And then similar to that, I'd also love to see if we can get a leading pedestrian interval installed. Again, I know I'm thinking further down the line, but I just want you guys to know what I really would like to see in terms of some of these design aspects, or at least that are really thought about before we go and rip some of this stuff up, because there's a lot of pedestrian activity over there. And then the last but not least, on the consultant piece, it talked about community engagement. I didn't specifically, it talked about folks that own property adjacent to these properties, adjacent to the roadways, but I did not see anything about the neighborhood associations. Will that also be included in the community engagement process?
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, most of the time for our maintenance projects, our biggest focus is the adjacent property owner and the impacts on their property. But if you'd like some sort of, additional outreach or or update to the neighborhood through some sort of communication, I think we can probably achieve that. Yeah,
And
that's-
I'm all ears if I can help with that, or just send them a link or whatever it is, but it doesn't have to be super staff intensive.
Sure.
Just want to make sure that they're aware and have an opportunity to participate.
Excellent.
That is it. Thank you so much, Justin.
Are there any other comments or questions?
So, Mr. President,
Yes.
I would move that we approve the FY twenty-three roadway and ADA improvements, Part 1 professional services agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our final portion of the meeting tonight will be community communications to us. Is there anything from the community,
I
Stacy?
do not have anybody.
Is there anyone here who would like to address us about anything? Seeing nothing, we will adjourn this meeting.
We have executive session.
And we, commissioners will go behind us.